Are we all here? Very good. And I will call to order the Tuesday, February 24th, Timnath Town Council work session. Paz, will you take the roll?
Yes. Mayor Robert Axmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Council Member Jeremy Holt, Council Member Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Council Member Lisa Lake. Here.
Four of us are present. Council Member Holt is out of town expectedly, so we will proceed forward. Work session, we have two agenda items. We'll see if we hit both of them. First is a work session on metropolitan districts, and the second is a possible executive session. We had a work session 2 weeks ago, and Ms. Steffel came forth with a handful of simple questions for us to answer. And kind of unbeknownst to her, this is a topic of great interest to council. And so we were looking to take a deeper dive. And so here we are today to take a deeper dive and see where we can get. So Carolyn, where shall we start?
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, I guess the questions weren't quite so simple, but definitely appreciate you guys coming back. So I'm not planning to make too much more of a presentation today, but to a little bit highlight the feedback I received from council members after the last work session, and then I think we can use that to guide your discussion rather than just saying, let's discuss everything. Maybe we can chunk it by some subject matters. So the other thing I do is I have started redlining the model service plan, and Katrine is just making some copies of it so I can hand it to you. I know you haven't seen it yet, but then if we really want to deep dive into one area, we can look at what I was thinking, knowing that it's definitely a work in progress. And, you know, before we get through this work session, we needed some more direction about specific items, but I tried to address some of the concerns raised by council. So I'd say the first one we might want to consider is transparency to purchasers. So I heard from two different council members that this was a concern for you, and specifically the concept that people might be buying into a metropolitan district without being aware of it. I'll say, first of all, there's a new state law in effect that when someone buys into a metropolitan district, they're required to get a disclosure at the time of entering into the contract to purchase. So that helps. But there's two other kind of low-hanging fruit that I think we could have added to our model service plan. The first one is a recorded notice, because right now there may not be, you know, much notice in your record, in your title commitment of the metropolitan districts, of course, taxes, and there may be other recorded things. But a lot of communities have a requirement in their model service plan that you record a specific notice against every property within the district that advises them they're in that district. And so I think that's really easy to add as another exhibit to our model service plan. And then that will also help with not just the first purchaser, but later purchasers. And then the second thing was specifically a recommendation by the mayor to have a notice posted at the sales center and model homes for the developer, and that will address specifically the first purchase. And so what we can do is I drafted a proposed notice that can actually be an exhibit to your model service plan that can say, this property is within a metropolitan district. That means, you know, it has a maximum mill levy of this mills, as can be adjusted, so it could go up. An average purchase price of a home, you know, so say $500,000, if they had the maximum mill levy, would be X amount per year paid just to the metropolitan district. I think we can also add which improvements they own and maintain so that people are aware, like if they own internal streets or a swimming pool, that there'll be those operation and maintenance costs and what those are to date. So those are the ways I tried to address that transparency. So if we want to, do you guys have more suggestions about that?
What about like listing it on websites? I know there's some required notices on their websites currently. What can we require for the Metro District websites to post that type of information so if people don't access it through paper notices, or how can we address that?
That sounds really, yeah, that's really a good suggestion. So I suggested that we add to our service plan that the districts have to organize a website, and if they're active within 90 days of their organization or return to active status, and then listed a number of things that have to be included. Now, state law already, has come a long way. So if you look in the last 4 years, there's been a lot of legislation to try to address this issue on a statewide level. So it already requires them to list the name of their directors, how they can be reached, their budget, their audited financial statements, an annual report, the dates of their meetings, how they can run for office if they're residents in there, certified election results, a map. And then this one, it says it should include a general explanation in plain, non-technical language about what a metropolitan district is, the public improvements and services it provides, and the amount of debt it can provide to pay for public infrastructure, what revenue can be used to repay the debt, the maximum mill levy it can assess, and how a resident can serve on the board of directors. So that's gone a long way. I don't think that the state law includes everything it needs to include. So some of the things that I think we can add to additional requirements to our model service plan, for instance, that it include copies of the meeting agendas and meeting minutes, that it include the rules and regulations, bylaws and specifications and covenants if they're doing covenant enforcement. Because right now, sometimes you have to dig, you have to contact the manager to get those documents. But it seems to me if they've legislated something like rules, it'd be nice to be on their website right away. A current fee schedule, a copy of the service plan, copies of intergovernmental agreements, copies of published notices so that they don't just, a lot of people don't read the legal section of the paper, and election dates and deadlines, and notices of vacancies when they have a vacancy, even so that residents are aware there's a vacancy and how they can apply for it. So that's another thing we can do is add some additional requirements into there.
Do you think it's possible to add calculators to this, like a sales tax calculator, so people can get an estimate of what they might be paying? Because I think a lot of times it's not accurate your first year when you're, especially for first time, but also ongoing home buyers. Once the sales tax, once you buy your home, it always increases.
One of the local communities does require a sales tax calculator to be posted on the website, so we could absolutely add that as an additional suggestion.
Yeah, I know. When I purchased my home, all of the relevant documents, CC&Rs and mill levy, they handed it out on a memory stick in digital form, which was pretty convenient.
Yeah, you're always going to be doing a title search as part of purchase of a property, but
Well,
it's
this was
whether.
even before I signed a document.
That's great.
They handed it to me. It's like, here's all of the paperwork that goes with buying a home in our subdivision. And I thought that was, pretty convenient because it's a lot of material to go through. So either having it accessible on the website, all of it, or in a digital form. It's probably too much to ask for printed form because it's a pretty hefty stack of information.
Yeah, I think if it's just on the website, anyone can access it, because if you required them to give you a thumb drive, I mean, that only affects the first purchaser, certainly future purchasers.
I'm just saying,
But yeah, it's helpful. Yeah.
because it wasn't on their website.
No, thank you, Carolyn. I think this disclosure stuff and an ability to just hit them over the head with it, hit a potential purchaser over the head with it is so important. I had the experience of walking into a sales office in our community, and I gave them every opportunity. I said, "Oh, is there a metro district here? What does that mean? How much will that cost me?" And essentially the response was, I don't know a whole lot about that, but there's a website you can go to. Of course, you go to the website and there are 7 different districts within the development. And, well, which one would I be buying into? Oh, I don't know. I think there's a map. You know, I mean, really hitting over the head that, you know, you are buying a $750,000 home. And if the maximum mill levy is assessed at that, it will be this many thousands of dollars a year, and that that amount will go up as your property value goes up. And then, you know, we didn't mention it, but maybe also adding in what the potential separate operation and maintenance, you know, monthly or quarterly fee is, or what the policy is on that, whether there's a limit to that or if it's essentially unlimited.
I don't know that anybody has a limited maintenance fee.
Yeah, some of them do require town consent to exceed what they have. So you're right, it's not limited for now, but you could say, you know, the current, you know, rate is $1,000 per year or whatever it is, subject to a 3% increase, with more increases need to be approved by the town. That's a lot of words. So we can, what we can do is once we come back to you with a model service plan, then we can have specific suggestions on the language. I think if we can get the overall thoughts right now, that's going to help us a long way.
So will the model service plan regulate the separate annual maintenance and operations fees separate from the mill levy component?
It does right now, actually. Right now, it says that it cannot exceed what's in the original proposed service plan, which can be accepted as increased by 3% without coming back to council. So we're proposing to keep that.
Right, unless they ask for more, and then they have to come to council and get it approved.
I think it would be helpful also if they could, even if they show the last few years, because I think sometimes if you notice a certain trend, or for metro districts that haven't raised it, sometimes when they decide to raise it, it's really raised. So whatever that language might look like.
Yeah, well, I mean, when they're trying to sell new properties and they have, you know, 10 houses that have been built and 4 models, they're not going to raise it. The developer will strive to keep it low until you get it built out enough, and then.
Well, but this
then
is for all homes.
I mean, that's typical. They tend to keep the rates down initially, and then.
Well, but if this is for all metro districts, then a lot of our metro districts are already pretty established. So for those owners, it'd be interesting just to.
Well, I don't know if this model, new model, and the regulations around it aren't going to affect existing metro districts, are they?
Yeah, the thought was that we're currently working on revisions to the model service plan that will apply to any newly created metropolitan
Exactly.
districts. Because that's when you have the most leverage, is when they're first coming in to get organized. Now, we do have a special district policy separately. So if we made policy changes to, you know, and we have an intergovernmental agreement with the metropolitan district. So if, as a policy matter, you wanted to say, I want every metropolitan district to also make a certain disclosure, I think most of them would probably be amenable to that. You know, they're still wanting to work well with the city. So if it's recording a notice or something, we could go to them and ask them to please do this.
I know that there's multiple metro districts that have updated it after their original. So anytime they updated it, they then took on the new model plan.
Carolyn, can I go back to transparency? When we talk about transparency, one thing we encountered with our metro district was where meetings were held and what times. So when we think about that, I know when these metro districts are just kind of getting off the ground, like our metro district now has a community center that we can hold it at, which is nice. when these are being established, do we require those to be held somewhere within town? Do we require them to be held maybe here at the town center? How can we require that to be convenient for residents to be able to attend?
Great question. Right now, we do not have that as a requirement. So all we have is the state law requirement, which is, again, this was just passed in the last 2 years, that they are required now to hold one annual meeting that has to be within, I think it's within 5 miles of the location of the district. So, but what you have is, sometimes they'll hold meetings down in Denver or something that's extremely inconvenient, but that's where their attorney and their manager is. And so what I would propose is a requirement that once you have end users, which is either a resident or a commercial tenant, that all meetings have to be held within the town. And then they could be in the district or they could be here in town hall. We've got a community room, and so they could be held in town hall. Another thing we can do is, in terms of the time, so what the town of Windsor did is they did require that all meetings be held after 5 p.m. on weekdays, because they wanted residents who work to be able to attend.
Yeah.
So is that something you'd like to incorporate as well?
Well, that took us a long time to get there. Do you remember that, Lisa?
Yeah. Meetings used to be during the week at like 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning or something like that initially, so.
Yeah, I think it's better to meet the needs of your residents than the needs of the board.
And the other thing we could add is once the majority of the board is end users, they can change that. So that could also just be a requirement for when you have development control. We could do it either way. It could always have to be in the evenings or just when until you have a majority of residents.
I think I'd rather just set it for during the week after 5. And within the town, and I know ours met in Loveland, and the place where they met was the management company offices, which were more than 5 miles away. Way more than 5.
Yeah, for regular meetings, other than this one annual meeting, yeah, they can be anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's important that it have to be in the community, at least within the town. I like Carolyn's idea that at least until it's board member controlled, it needs to happen at family-friendly hours. And then once it goes to board control, if they decide for whatever reason this particular board really wants to do it on Wednesday, I guess once it's residents controlled, I'm not concerned. I think they'll likely still choose.
I could go either way. I know for our residents in our metro district, we've been told when to do it, so I try to do what their needs are. So I don't know what your sticking point is, Bill. How do you?
I mean, most people aren't going to be able to go to it without taking off of work. And if the goal is transparency and getting community feedback about decisions at the meeting, and most people on those boards work, that it seems like after 5 o'clock during the week makes the most sense. I mean, is there a problem with after 5 during the week? I suppose you could do it on the weekend, but if they decided to have it at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning, there would be, most people in the community wouldn't be able to attend unless you're retired or.
I'm okay with the evenings as well, because I know a lot of times it takes years before the board is then resident run. So for those first few years, it would be, there are community members who want to go to those meetings, especially early on.
So another thought I had is that we could require that the meetings have a public comment section on every agenda. currently state law says, and this is also a new law, that the budget, the meeting where the budget is approved has to have a public comment session. And I thought, gosh, that must mean the state legislature thought there are districts that never listen to their residents and never allow public comments. And so it seems like not a bad thing that they would have to have, you know, they can limit them by time, place, and manner. They can limit them to 3 minutes, but some way that the residents can talk to their.
I
Board
think
members.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, that along with budget specifically, a certain time period of publishing the proposed budget before it gets voted on to make it available to residents, allow them to review it, and then provide meaningful comment.
Okay, that is something new. State law only requires you publish a notice of the budget and say where it's available for inspection, usually the attorney's office. So we could, if we wanted them to put the draft budget on their website, we could do that, and that is something that's an addition.
Yeah. If you're talking about transparency and money, that's the place to have the most transparency.
Okay, any more thoughts on transparency? Okay, so the next one is about public benefit. And every council member who responded agreed that it would be useful to, instead of just saying, I mean, your current policy says that there should be a public benefit from organizing a metropolitan district, and that we could go further in establishing the goals that we want to encourage. In talking to staff, I felt like we'd be premature if we said what those goals are right now, because you're currently going through a whole planning process to figure out what your town goals are. And so once you get through the comprehensive plan rewrite, we're going to have a better idea of what the key goals are that council wants to encourage in the town. So for now, the special district policy does say that it should further the goals of the comprehensive, or should be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And I think we just go further and say it furthers the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, and the applicant needs to establish how, submit a letter explaining how it furthers the goals of the comp plan. Maybe leave it at that for 6 months, come back once you've established these are your key goals. Some of the goals that council members threw out were infrastructure readiness, water sustainability, fiscal stability, resident protections. But I think, I'm not sure that it's the time to establish what those goals are right now.
Yeah, I'm okay with that notion of a general statement, and then add the specifics once we have the comp plan in hand and final approved, then go back and add the specifics that we want. And I think we should add the specifics.
Yeah, I know that Fort Collins went so far as to include the qualifier of what extraordinary public benefit. I don't know what our qualifier should be. I don't know that it needs to be an A+, but I want it to say a little more probably than just some public benefit, significant or meaningful, or I don't know what that qualifier is.
Yeah, like I said, once we have the comp plan and the specifics of the comp plan, you could say you have to have at least 2 of those, or some number of specific ones, and that they would have to, we'd have to agree that they meet. Otherwise, it's just fuzzy language around it, and it's not very meaningful.
The other thing that council member Wagner pointed out, which you'd know it was him even if I didn't say this, is thinking about a measurable benefit. And so
Exactly. Specific.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
The problem is, I guess, so when we do the search plan, note that we also always have an IGA with this town at the same time between the metropolitan districts and the town. And so if we were looking at measurable benefits or something like that, those would almost be more likely to be put into the comprehensive plan. I think one of the things we want to do is, staff has expressed that sometimes they don't have a good enforcement mechanism with metropolitan districts. If they don't build a required improvement, they don't perform required maintenance, they don't, one of the things we'd like them to do is take over the weed compliance policy and enforcement of that. And so I think we can kind of strengthen the language in our IGA about, you know, what are the remedies, maybe withholding permits until, you know, those things are under compliance or something. But I'll work with staff on, is there an enforcement mechanism if we do have any additional requirements? Okay, so the next thing we have is mill levies. And I can hand this out. This is my working copy of the model service plan. Oh, thanks. Okay, Aaron's gonna bring it over. Okay, so for debt, first of all, I want to point out that there was, again, a legislative amendment that says we are required to have a maximum debt mill levy. Now, the way our model service plan says it's just an aggregate mill levy, so I think it's helpful to have a specific number for debt. So we talked about setting that maybe at 40 mils or 35 mils. You could go as high as 50. But the advantage of setting it at 40 or 35 is that it provides some room for an operations and maintenance mill levy, as opposed to them using all of the mill levy capacity for debt. So 2 of the council members suggested setting it at 40 mils, 1 at 35, so we can talk about where we want that to be, and then maybe setting the O&M mill levy at O&M limit at 10 mils, or you could even say 15, because, you know, if they wanted even less for debt. And then keeping the aggregate at, you know, either 40 or either keeping it at 50 or possibly lowering it to 40. All of the respondents agreed that it should be adjusted from the date of service plan approval. And when we looked at your communities, that's your neighboring communities, most of them adjusted from the date of service plan approval, not going back another 10 years. But it's going to be increasing over time. And then we talked about the mill levy imposition term, of how long they can be taxed. And there was some interest in 35 years, but most of the council members liked keeping it at 40 years that the properties can be taxed. And I think there was some interest in also saying, or 45 years from service plan approval, so that they'd have to come back. If they didn't start the mill levy within the first 5 years, they have to come back and ask for an extension, so that it's encourages them to start development and not have just a vacant district. The other thing you could do is say, if no debt is issued within 10 years, they have to dissolve the district or come back to you and amend their service plan and show justification as to why it should be continued. Okay, so we can talk about that, where we want to keep those as limits.
I'll tell you, I think I was the outlier that was pitching 35% on the limit and
35 mils.
35 mils, and I was probably the outlier that wanted the shortest term. You know, part of what was really compelling, Carolyn, is the study that you sent talking about how in the long run, a metro district development in the long run costs buyers on average 2% more than had it been invested up front. And so, you know, I did want to try to limit the number of improvements that are being deferred through the Metro District mill levy process as opposed to incurred by developers up front, because the more of that's financed, ultimately, the more goes to interest as opposed to actual community benefit. And so that's why I was pitching the 35 mil limit, you know, for the initial infrastructure. And then the same with the length of the district. You know, we are taxing, at this point, grandchildren in some cases. And when we get into those 40, 45-year terms, you know, there's just no connection to the initial improvements that were made. And so I would advocate for lowering that to a 35-year limit, but I know I was the outlier there.
Well, I could be talked into a shorter term limit. I mean, most people, when they're buying a new home, they're thinking 30 years because that's the typical mortgage. So 40 is kind of a long time.
I'm also good with shorter. I feel like the homeowners do pay upfront as well. I think it benefits the developer way more than it benefits
Of
the
course.
homeowner. And so anything that we can do to help the homeowner in that, because you don't get a discount on your house because it's in a metro district. I know they say that it's a way to keep costs down, but I don't necessarily believe that.
It's competitive. It's just another way of
Right, a house is, there's
of
certain market value.
embedding the equivalent of a mortgage, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if they had, it would probably be maybe another 100,000, 150 on top of what they're asking, and so now it's not so competitive for what you get.
Yeah, because the homes are going to go for market value regardless of whether
Regardless.
they're in the metro district. So I'm good with keeping it as low as possible.
Yeah, I could be talked into lower. I was 40 and 10 and a max of 50, and I said, okay, with 40 years, not 45 though. And I could be talked down on all those fronts. I do think it's important to have a max and an inclusion and room for the operations and maintenance in the mill levy. And the reason is, in my thinking anyway, is that if they charge you O&M outside of the mill levy, it's not tax deductible. Whereas property taxes, even the metro district operation and maintenance fees, if it's on your tax bill, is both state and federally deductible. So whereas the money that you pay on a quarterly, ours is quarterly, it's cash on the barrelhead, and you don't get to write that off at all.
Is there a way, though, so if it's part of the mill levy, there's nothing stopping them from adding a separate O&M fee, is there?
No,
So they could do both.
they could do both, but they have to use, if you say you
Yeah, it has
have
to be
a
used for that
10,
purpose.
and I'm using this just as an example, a 10 for O&M operations and maintenance, and 40 for debt.
Has to be.
If they go up to 50, 10 mills has to be for operations and maintenance, and they can't charge you more than what they spend on operation and maintenance. So it well, legally.
Can they?
can't.
Can they build a
They could build a
reserve?
reserve, of course. Yeah, and actually, one of the suggestions from one of the council members was requiring a reserve of some amount because that is good planning, so.
Is that you, Luke?
Yeah, that was
A
me.
reserve, a reserve for what purpose?
I mean, you have to replace
For
trees.
operations.
You have
Operations
to-
and maintenance.
For operations and maintenance.
And it might depend, they're owning a rec center, I mean, it may be a different amount depending on how many improvements they're planning to own and in long term that are gonna need, but yeah.
And then they would have to put it on an amortization. I mean, they can't just make the number up out of the blue sky. It's got to be based on a reasonable financial analysis of their capital and their capital improvements that are going to require replacement under operations and maintenance, as well as anticipated. It can't be arbitrary.
Well, right now, there are separate governmental entities, so they have to establish, there's no legal requirement that you have to have a reserve fund. except you have to have, well, there is, you have to have a rainy day fund of 3% of your tax amounts. So that's what the requirement is. There's no additional requirement as to what that is. So they're looking at a case by case basis. So they might decide if they want to hire a financial advisor or say 1 year of operating revenue, or, right now we're just leaving that up to their discretion.
So in ours, Bill, we have a 3% tabor that we put aside, but it's not enough, right? If you do 3% tabor, that's not enough to meet a pool reserve, fence reserve, all the maintenance we have to do. So we had to establish above and beyond our tabor reserve. So that's why I made that suggestion, was we actually did an internal reserve study looking, to your point, of the amortization of all of our assets, the HVAC, the fences, the pool, the roof, the paint, all of that. We did that study. And the only thing we were putting back before was tabor, but it was always getting eaten up somewhere else. So it was never enough.
So in your case, what was it? What was the percentage that seemed reasonable?
That we're doing now.
Well, you're making up for 20 years of
Yeah.
lost time, so that's
Yes,
not
yeah.
really fair.
So
The
what
point-
we did is we identified the things that we want to replace in the next 10 years. So it's not even a percentage. We identified that we're going to have to replace the roof, that we're going to have to repaint the thing, and then we amortize that over a 10-year period. And so we identified to residents what we're going to replace, and then we put that into there. So we identified
Seems
a plan.
reasonable.
So that's how we.
Right, and all I'm saying is it shouldn't be arbitrary. There should be some rationale around what you put in reserves, and it should make sense.
Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but there also has to be bond reserves as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's on a case by case basis with the bonds, but it
Okay.
depends on it is typical to have a bond reserve requirement, and especially the bonds issued early in the development are probably going to have a higher reserve requirement, so that's going to be built into the bond structure and usually part of the initial borrowing. So that's not even funded out of taxes necessarily, except sort of indirectly. So they would usually include that in the principal that they borrow, and then a portion of that is put into the reserve fund.
Thank you. So can I argue with council a little bit here on the O&M and the mill levy? So I was one that said a cap at 40, and then said the O&M at 10. My only concern out of this is where we've been with some of our previous metro districts with bankruptcy, where we've had them fail. And I haven't been here for this.
One, right? Only one.
Was it one or two? I thought we had a failure in Saratoga and one in Wild Wing.
I don't know if they were metro
Or was it the-
districts at
have they
the
not been-
time.
Okay.
I know Wild Wing went through a foreclosure or bankruptcy or something, but I don't know if it was a metro district.
But I don't know that that was the metro district.
Yeah, I'm not
That-
sure either.
That could
Okay.
have been the
I
business.
thought it was the builder or the
Okay.
developer
Yeah.
or something,
And-
but I'm not
and
100%
the
sure.
same thing with West Village, the builder that had that before the,
Yeah, they sold it to a different,
well, no,
Yeah.
William Lyons bought it out from, bought it, somebody who was going bankrupt. So that's different than the
Yeah.
metro district
Yeah.
going bankrupt.
So what I want to argue in this is we continue to see escalating costs for these. And in that article, Robert, one thing that they talked about was, well, once they get to a certain point, well, then they should reduce the mill levy. Like if you read that article, but I don't think I've seen across any metro districts actually reduce the mill levy that we've seen. So I thought that was an interesting thing that they brought up. I think that was the DOLA article where they talked about possibly reducing that. So my concern out of this would be, without knowing like a full study of this, of setting it artificially low that wouldn't allow for the necessary infrastructure to build out these things. So I don't know if there's more work to be done around there or if we could get more information around it, but I agree. I would set it what's reasonable. I just don't know without understanding all that, what those costs would be and setting it in a way that we're gonna not have the right size streets or bad water systems. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's my concern is having a district that's poorly built.
Sure, I mean, if you're gonna buy a house, there's two ways to look at it. There's how much house do I need, and then go borrow that much, and then there's go to the bank and say, how much will you lend me, and then go buy that house. And my concern is that when we set the mill levy high, the perspective is, well, we have this much to work with, so let's get the extra big slide at the pool.
I agree. And secondary of that, there's also, what I sent Carolyn in this was also the idea of the developer loans to itself as well. So not only are what we're dealing with is what we can see in the mills, but also what is the debt that's owed by these metro districts or these communities that are kind of separate of that. And so I'm not sure how to regulate or get our arms around all of that, to your point, right? Like, how would that be done? So I agree, there's fiscal responsibility in this, and there's fiscal accountability. But how do we look at this and say, is 35 appropriate, besides us sitting up here and saying it's appropriate?
So oh, go ahead.
I mean, the whole idea of the metro district is that it's putting in infrastructure and providing a benefit specifically to the homeowners and then secondarily to the community at large. And so what concerns me when you say, well, the debt can also be used to pay the developer and in other words, they could be making a profit off of putting in the infrastructure, right, separately. And how is that, how much profit is appropriate under those situations? I mean, they're actually improving by putting in the infrastructure, they're increasing the value of the land, and the developer generally isn't the builder of the homes. They put in the infrastructure and sell the lots at a profit, and then the builder builds a house at a profit. So I'm by having a high mill levy, there's a lot of room for those funds not necessarily going for the infrastructure, but actually going into somebody's bank account as profit. And so how do you regulate that aspect of it? I'm not saying they're not entitled to anything, but that shouldn't be where the money is being made. The money should be made on the value of the property increasing because you've put in good infrastructure. And as far as lousy roads go, I know our planning department is not going to allow an inappropriate road going in, period. They have to meet standards, even if it's a private road. I mean, right, Scott, is that accurate?
It's really Public Works, but yeah, we adopted Lucas standards, and they're standards that we have to abide by unless they ask for
A
waiver.
variance,
Yeah.
which would have to come before us, and I don't think any of us are going to allow them to put in a substandard road.
I mean, I know Justin can speak to it, but the last thing the town would want to do is accept a substandard road that we would have to maintain.
Right, or even if it's a private road in a subdivision that's allowed to build a private road, I would certainly say it would not be to the benefit of the future homeowners to have a substandard road either, even if it was private, period. It should still be built to the same standards that every other public roadway is built within the town.
Yeah, that's correct. Everything has to be built to the Lucas standards. We do inspections. There is even a warranty period. So especially all the stuff that's in the public right of way, that's after it's done and approved and we accept it, then it becomes, at that point, the town's responsibility. And then we work with you on the capital improvements and maintenance.
So just one follow-up question to that, Justin, and it relates, and I know I'm off track, so I'll make it real short. If it's a private road in a subdivision that's built to the Lucas standards, are there still public right-of-ways associated with that roadway, like for the lighting or et cetera, or is it entirely private?
Yeah, so we are getting a little bit off topic. This could be another hour of discussion, but I think we are going to talk about that, especially after one of the previous developments, look at the private road standards. But to answer your question, they are per Lucas. They have to be built per the standards. We do review them. Typically, they are in what would be called a private or a public access easement. So there's those provisions. Typically, that's
Got it.
required part
Okay.
of that.
Yeah, enough for now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Lisa, maybe you can answer this question, because we went through this with the GID. Isn't the mills used to promise to pay the bond? So if we're limiting the mills here, how does that look for the bond market? Or maybe that's not your question, but like if we go out there and we limit mills, can that affect the interest rate that ultimately affects what these Metro District people are buying?
I don't think it'll affect the interest rate, but it'll just affect the amount that they can borrow.
So it'll affect the amount they can borrow.
Mhm.
So, because in the GID, we are affecting on the land value, right?
Right. And then we build out based on projections.
Sorry, and I'm trying to ask this question. So it was the assessed value, right?
Right,
And the mills are based on the assessed value that we
Right.
can pull in, right?
right.
So you don't think that would affect in any way the rate the
I-
bond could get?
I don't see that it would impact the rate, the total bond amount for sure.
Naturally,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Naturally.
it's pledged mill levy revenue, so it's actually a pretty solid source of revenue to repay those bonds.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it
Yeah.
wouldn't cause the rate to go up
Not-
for these holders.
Not from what I can tell.
So there's another issue there too, and that is, you mentioned pool and pool house and all of that. And that doesn't necessarily have to be under a metro district. You can have a metro district that has the infrastructure, your roads, your sewer, water, et cetera, and that's what it's focused on, and maintenance of the common areas. And if they wanted to have a pool, a clubhouse, or some other significant amenity, that could be done under an HOA, a homeowners association, separate from the metro district. And in fact, in West Village, because there was no swimming pool available, the builder actually built the smaller pool that's in West Village. It's now part of Timnath Ranch Metro District because they ended up buying it out, and that was created and paid for by the developer or by the builder, and then an HOA was put on all the houses that the builder built with an annual, I think the annual dues were $300 a year for primarily for operations and maintenance. And so it's certainly possible to do those extra amenities outside of a metro district and have the metro district really focused on the infrastructure aspects.
So all of the improvements need to be constructed by the developer if they're not constructed by the Metropolitan District. So we kind of use that as a baseline. Usually the cost of all of the infrastructure exceeds their borrowing capacity as a metropolitan district. So what I have seen recently, especially with construction costs, is it's not that they'll go above and beyond because they've got a huge pot of money to spend. Usually, even with that pot of money, it's less than what their projections are for the cost of all of the public improvements. You can stack an HOA on it, but the problem is that that doesn't help with the affordability cost if they're then having to pay into a metropolitan district and an HOA. So I think if we're looking at the overall affordability, the question's the same, whether they pay the fee to the HOA or duplicate fees.
Well, it allows you to have what the community wants, right? Just like Harmony has their fancy pool and tennis courts and golf course, and if you buy a house up there, you have to buy into it at a certain level.
Yeah, now they don't have a metropolitan district, so that was in lieu of a metropolitan district, is my understanding. So, for most of our communities, I think one place that they have metropolitan, where they have HOAs, is sometimes if you're doing townhomes, and then you have separate, like, shared party walls, or you have separate community benefits for those townhomes. So that's one of the things I've talked about with Logan is, trying to minimize that overlap where they have to pay to both the metropolitan district and to an HOA when it's overlap for only some of the homes. And, townhome is smaller, so you don't want them to be paying more in fees than larger single-family homes. So that's a factor as well. Okay, so I guess if we can get a consensus, so here's what my thought is right now our aggregate is 50. If we keep it at 50, but we say 40 is your debt limit, 10 is your O&M, the developers, and we have adjustments from the date of service plan approvals from a developer, and this is already a reduction a little bit because they can only run it at 40 mils instead of 50 mils, and it's not really, was it 56 right now if you look at the increase from 2018, so it's not 56, we're bringing it back down to 50. So it's really a factor of that combination of protecting residents versus being developer friendly is how I look at it, because I think that they could spend the 40 or the 35 and, 40 is already going to seem like a bit of a reduction. So it's a matter, if we could get a consensus on where you'd like to be for debt at 40 or 35, that'd be helpful.
So are you saying, though, that they just forego the operations and maintenance altogether and just spend the full 50 on the infrastructure portion?
Right now, I guess I don't know. That would be a question to ask the actual districts. How much are they certifying to debt? And I haven't surveyed that. But right now, they could go up to the full 50
and
for
ignore
debt.
the.
They could, and then pay for all the O&M over with fees.
I don't like that.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're currently on average staying 5 mils for, I don't know where they are. We haven't surveyed that yet to see what that's.
I mean, the metro districts get chewed up by two things. The first is the debt service because they didn't sell enough lots. And then the second is O&M increasing over time without a sufficient reserve. And so I would propose that we do the 35 for infrastructure, but then have the overall cap at 50 so that they can have long-term, if the O&M starts to accelerate and they need to raise that, they can. I think that ensures both financial sustainability on the underlying debt and allows them to adjust if needed for the O&M, and it takes into account what Councilmember Jenkins was saying, which is if they're doing their O&M within that 15% as opposed to a separate assessment, at least they're getting the tax benefit. The residents at least getting the tax benefit.
Right, and actually, the smart thing if you're a developer setting up your metro district for success, for long-term success, is you you would collect a significant operation and maintenance fees from the very beginning, so it doesn't creep up. It's actually at a higher level, so you're building your maintenance, you're building your O&M reserves from day one. So it would, I mean, I think by setting an overall max higher than the debt limit max, it's going to force people to, it's going to force developers to actually collect the O&M fees beyond what they really need at the very beginning and start building a reserve. At least that's what I would anticipate.
So I want to clarify, are you saying that it should be 35 and 15 and actually broken down that way so that 15 to O&M, 35 to debt
As maximums.
max, which we know that most will probably go to the max.
Well, because right now it's no max on debt, no max on O&M, and a max on the aggregate. The max is only on the aggregate, which means they could go higher on O&M and lower on the debt, but most likely they go higher on the debt and way lower on the O&M, and then just charge O&M outside of the mill levy process. So I'm okay with, I could go along with the 35 and 15. I'm also happy with the 40 and 10, but as fixed limits and a 50 aggregate.
As someone who pays outside O&M fees outside of, it would be nice to have that as part of the mill, so I'm okay with the 35 and 15. I would also not be opposed to 40-10, but I like the idea of helping them to create that reserve from the beginning as well.
So as somebody who currently sits on a board, what say you?
Yeah. Here's where I stand. I will support the 35, but I would encourage this council, future councils, to continue to get feedback, come back and revisit this often. I think we are going to get feedback, some good, some bad. I just have concerns that the 35 is way too low, and costs are going to be pushed one place or the other. And I don't know the right answer, but I feel like maybe right now interest rates are not in favor of home buyers right now. They're struggling for first-time home buyers, and there's a lot that are going to challenge them. So I don't want to flip this switch necessarily on our home buyers or residents of Timnath in this. And I think moving the pendulum too far one way will hurt a lot of potential home buyers in Timnath. So that's my only concern is, like, I'm willing to support this, but as long as we're willing to come back and say, yeah, we need to go to 40 and go back to 40-10, sure, I'll support it. But I want to make sure that we're not going to get into, we're not going to look at this model service plan again in 4 years.
Yeah,
We need to come back and look at this.
reasonable.
We need to come back and look at this again if we're getting feedback, and all of a sudden we go from a median house of, $650, now we're at $8, and we cannot sell homes. So
I don't think it'll jump
I'm
that.
just saying, you know what I'm saying. So I'm just saying, like,
Is there
I'm
any
willing to
way
support
we
it.
could get any real data from existing metro districts about their current splits between debt and O&M on mill levy?
Yes, we could pull all of that before this comes back for your final, because you're going to approve this by resolution, so it's going to come back as an action item, and we can pull
I
that.
think we should do that. And that way, we're at least informed and we're not doing something that the developers are going to go, you guys are nuts.
Okay, I will present that, we'll provide that information when we come back. So we'll kind of say, that's okay. That gives me enough feedback to kind of say we're in the 35 to 40 range, and we're going to come back and discuss it, maybe leaning towards 35, but let's look at some more data. Okay.
I think we want to make decisions on good data. And I guess I will just kind of throw in that in many ways, the affordability is an illusion. Yes, your house is cheaper. Yes, your mortgage is $500 a month cheaper.
You're still paying the same amount.
But you're paying it.
You're paying it
on
one
the
way or the
mills.
other, and you might be paying more.
So
which is what the data says, right?
Yeah,
The
in the
data
long
says
term,
you,
exactly.
long-term, you pay 2%
No,
more.
I'm not disagreeing, but it's the cash, right? Where do you pay the cash? And so the cost, it is cost shifting, right? Where are you shifting the costs? Is it now in your pocket? So where do we look at our community? We say we're a family community. We want to push single family homes, right? And we want to have young people in our community. So if we're saying that, who probably doesn't have cash? And so I'm just throwing that out there. I'm just throwing out that for argument's sake. We say that, and then we increase the initial buying price of the home. That's probably who we're going to affect. The developer's not going to hold that in his pocket or their pocket. They're going to increase the price of the home, right?
Well, maybe, or they might change the design of the home to make it more affordable. There are a lot of, I mean, there are different ways of approaching it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you can do duplexes, you can do quadruplexes. There are a lot of ways in which you can put housing on a piece of property with the same infrastructure. So, and a lot of it depends on the market conditions and interest rates and what people want. I mean, Westlake or West Village is a lot different than Trailside in terms of housing design, et cetera. In order to keep the price point ideally around 400,000, which seems like the target entry price for a lot of houses.
Thanks.
Okay, so do we have a consensus on the mill levy imposition term of 35 years or 40 years?
I advocate for the lower. These people should get value for their money. They shouldn't just pay a bunch of interest. And when you extend the term from 35 to 40 years, the bang for the buck is pretty minimal in terms of better infrastructure, but the interest change is significant.
I don't feel strongly enough to disagree.
Yeah, again, I think I'd like to, I mean, it would be nice to have some data.
I expect you will also hear feedback from your developer, your district community. So I think once we come to, what I'd like to do is once we have a proposed model service plan to distribute that to some of the metropolitan district attorneys to be able to provide feedback if
I
you're
mean,
comfortable with that.
Yeah, I understand the benefit of 35 years, and I, as a homeowner, I would prefer that, but I don't know what the impacts exactly would be, 35 versus 40. Would you get a lower interest rate at 35 as opposed to 40? Or would it, end up being a wash, a lower interest rate at 40 and a higher at 35? I don't know.
We can ask that. We have relationships with some of the brokers even that are working on some of the town deals, so we could just ask them. Lisa and I could ask them if that makes a difference in their opinion, but okay. All right, let's move on. Okay, non-potable water. This should be a pretty quick one. I think everyone was generally of the consensus to require non-potable water systems for district-owned common areas as long as it's available from the water provider, unless the town approves otherwise. So if they come to you and say, look, I'm gonna have to extend 3 miles of non-potable pipeline, it's gonna triple the cost of my house, you're probably not gonna require it. So.
No, but I think I said something akin to that, but I also had an add-on that if they didn't do non-potable water systems, then I would want to see other measures put in place that are smart water systems, a variety of things that could improve the use of water for irrigation purposes, the conservation of water for irrigation purposes. So I would be more stringent if they didn't have a non-potable water source for common area irrigation. I'd want to see a better water conservation plan if they're using potable water.
I'm seeing nods. Okay. Remember, we're also going to be coming back to you to talk about your conservation plan in terms of what irrigable plants are allowed and all those other factors. So you'll also be looking at that from a town-wide level, and some of those restrictions are going to be just imposed on the developer from a town code perspective, as opposed to, I guess the question is, are they needed as a metropolitan district restriction, or is it more appropriate for a developer restriction? I don't know if Scott has a thought on that.
No, my wheels are spinning as you guys are, I mean, we can come at that a lot of different ways too. So I'm also thinking about what we're talking about later tonight about the wildland fire code. There's other, we got landscaping codes, weeds. There's a lot of ways we can look at town standards versus having the metro districts carry some of the water on that. So.
And the reason I raised it is every time I've raised the issue about what the metro districts currently do in terms of poor water usage, like running their sprinklers in the middle of a rainstorm, soaking the ground so that it's near flood levels, and you walk across it and you sink in because there's so much water. And the answer has been, well, they're a quasi-governmental organization and we don't really have the authority to do anything to get them to change their use of water. What I'm saying is, if we put it in, given that they're a quasi-governmental organization, and once they come into being under the model plan, they need to abide by the rules within the model plan, and they don't have to abide by a code change with regard to landscaping and irrigation. We don't make metro districts retroactively change their irrigation plans. At least that's what I've been told in the past. So if they don't have if it's a new metro district and they don't or are unable to put in a non-potable system, I want to make sure what they do put in is state-of-the-art in terms of water conservation practices, period. And I think we should be doing more elsewhere.
We'll come back to you on that one. We'll brainstorm offline.
Okay.
Good. Another thing we could do is, right now the service plan says they can't purchase water without prior town approval. We could say that they can purchase non-potable water without our prior approval, with some restrictions like that they can't pay more than what the developer paid to purchase the water. So the developer's not making a profit. Now this has come up in real life examples where, well, I bought the water, it's 5 years later, water is going up really fast in Colorado, so I want to sell it to the Metro District for a different price. Which leads me to another way you can protect against, limit the amount of profit that a developer makes, is often in a model service plan, you'll see something that says when an improvement is purchased from the developer, they have to have an outside person certify that the improvement's actually there, it's properly constructed, and that what you're purchasing it for is a fair value. And it's just an extra level of protection, because there's also been cases where, hey, you purchase something, you go out there, it's not there, or it's not, you're overpaying for an improvement, so that way.
Isn't that fraud? I mean, if you purchase something that isn't there, that sounds like fraud to me.
It is, so.
I think it's worthwhile
but
having. That's a
it's-
good protection.
It's a good protection. So basically, you know, you talked about reimbursements to the developer. There's always going to be reimbursements to a developer with a metropolitan district because it's going to go, I mean, when the metropolitan district is first established, there is no tax base because no homes are built yet. So somebody has to advance the money to organize the metropolitan district, have the initial election, and build the improvements until they get to the point where the market will support issuance of debt. So often the developer will have an advance reimbursement agreement where they're saying, we're advancing all the costs, I mean, almost every time, we're advancing all the costs of organizing the district, we're advancing, you know, your first year operational funds, we're advancing the purchase of the, and sometimes the construction of the improvements. And then when debt is issued, the district will reimburse the developer for some of those costs. And if the debt cannot support all of the public infrastructure that's put in, that's when they have that outstanding obligation to, okay, if you've paid off all of your bonds and you still have extra within your debt capacity, you on the back end reimburse more to the developer if you end up having more funds available. So there's a number of different ways you can kind of protect against that being too extreme. Some towns say that the developer debt goes away after a certain number of years. You know, you can only have it for 20 years instead of 40. Or even saying it has to be forgiven after 40 years. And so, you know, limitations on the amount of interest you can pay to the developer debt. And some of those have been written into state law, so we're putting those into your model service plan. So those are some of the ways we can protect against that being a problem. So those are some of my thoughts on the developer debt issue and some ways that we can address that. So what we've added to the model service plan is we need a certification that the improvements are constructed and that they're being purchased for fair value, that the developer debt expires at the mill levy imposition term, so at that 30 or 35 years, and that an outside financial advisor has to certify what the interest rate is for that developer debt.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, those are really good solutions. You know, the problem I'm continually trying to figure out how we solve is this oversight issue, right? Because on one hand, this is an independent entity with its own board, and they need to be responsible for making sure things are running right. On the other hand, we as the town want to make sure these are being run well, but we don't want to put a bunch of town resources and money into doing the oversight. And, you know, like Luke previously asked the question, was it Fort Collins or somebody that, you know, runs these plans through their finance committee? And I think the thought was, probably wouldn't get bang for the buck there. But, you know, I am interested in ways that we can put on the Metro District a responsibility to pay for reasonable auditing and oversight. I think those are some good suggestions.
We did add to your policy, actually, that if they ask for approvals, that can be charged to them. So when a district comes in and asks for an increase in fees or another approval that requires town staff and consultant staff, they're not paying for town staff time, but for outside consultant time. And there's also a fee for applying for a special district and for an amendment to a service plan. And then in terms of oversight, I don't know if I've seen a town that charges just for the regular oversight. I think that's typically just considered town business, but they are required to make annual reports to us that have to include specific information. So, but they're usually don't say that much. They're usually pretty simple. annual reports. And I guess I would say we probably do not want to do much oversight. We want to do as little as possible because we also don't want to take on the liability. We want to really keep the arm's length distance of, you're a separate governmental entity. We're not responsible for catching any wrongdoing or anything. We want to put in the right requirements up front and then trust you guys to do the right thing. You're a governmental entity. They have fiduciary duties, just as you do to their residents. And so they've got, subject to open records, open meetings, all of those same requirements you are.
I don't mean to drag us back on one thing, Carolyn, but for these developer reimbursements, and I think I saw this in our Fort Collins one, can we require them then not to charge interest like they do in Fort Collins?
I didn't re-review that one before today. Do they charge no interest or do they just not have it compound?
Restriction on compounding, right?
Compounding, something like that.
Compound.
Yeah, can we put that in ours? 'Cause
Yes, you could.
I think that would be worthwhile. Like, I don't know what your council thoughts are, but if there's no money available and they're going back and forth, I'm not sure. Like, that's future people that haven't even moved here that are all taking on that interest. So I think that was a good thing that I saw in the Fort Collins one, if you guys are up for that. My other thought process, Carolyn, is I see in this thought process of oversight, when I looked at that map that we have, that you sent out for all these districts, is we're lucky enough in Timnath Ranch, we have one district, but we have a controlling district, which we've talked a lot about. But you go over to these new districts, there's 7 districts. What can we do about that? Because if we want to get resident-controlled boards, then we need 40 residents to do this. So how do we solve that problem? Can we put like an overlay controlling like an operations district, like it's a resident-led, because it becomes really hard. Like, we want to push for resident-led districts, but we can't bring 100 people forward to do this work. So how do we get from 7 districts to maybe 1 district over time, like with occupancy, or, because it doesn't make sense, because residents are then disjointed. It feels like they're slicing and dicing. How do we do that?
Well, that's a great question. And I was just talking to David O'Leary, who's one of the district's attorneys he actually represents a lot of the metro districts in town. And he's a strong proponent of this. He really likes consolidating districts after they get to resident control. It's more cost effective. You're not passing 5 budgets, you're passing 1. It is easier to get people to run for the board because they can't always find enough people to fill the seats. And actually, the developer wants to get off the board once it's done. They don't want to keep having to do this. So he has consolidated one of the districts and is proposing to consolidate another set of the metro districts in town that is all built out. And so what it does require is an election. And so then they all have to elect to support consolidation, and then they elect 1 board instead of the 5. And so yes, you're going to be seeing that in the next year from one of the other, and I'm trying to remember which one, I can't remember for sure. And then, but I think we can write it into there to say once they have, I think it was Loveland that said once they're 10 years from issuance of debt, and I forget exactly how they phrase it, but a certain number of years out, they are required to consolidate with the other districts. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is, like you said, an operations overlay district. And I would be of the opinion we don't allow control districts anymore, where you never hand over control to the residents. So I propose putting in language that says, they have to be structured so that every house is included, every district includes some developable lots that they expect will ultimately be held by end users. How many? Yeah, you're right. You need a threshold. If you have 15 homes, you still might not find anybody to run for the board. There's some minimum. And so what an operations overlay district does is if you have 5 individual districts, then you have another that are all residential. You have another district that overlays all of those 5. So everyone is a resident of 2 districts, their individual district and the overlay district. And then the overlay district is the one that does the operations and maintenance, that owns the infrastructure, that does the covenant control and the design review. But because of it's an overlay, those residents are also eligible electors of the overlay district, so that as soon as you have your first resident, they can also be an elector of that overlay district. And that's something that I like personally. They cannot exceed the maximum debt limits, so that limit, if it's 50, it cannot increase above 50 by the fact that you're in 2 districts. That's going to be an aggregate limit for both of them. And so why do we have multiple districts? So first of all, if you have a development that's proceeding over a long period of time, like 20 years, they don't want to build the internal roads for the part of the development that's 10 years out, because then it's going to start decaying because it doesn't have the cars being driven on it. And you're also actually increasing the cost to the first residents by having them pay for stuff that they don't need. So there is a purpose to allowing that phased development and having multiple districts. And another purpose is maybe they have different needs. Now, I've kind of split views on this, but for instance, if somebody wanted to put in this was something that one of the district attorneys raised to me, if someone wanted to put in a grocery store, they don't tolerate the same level of mill levies. So the thought was maybe if you have multiple district structures, you could do different mill levy rates depending on what is ultimately constructed there. So, and same thing for townhomes. You could actually have a lower mill levy rate for townhomes, knowing that they have to pay for an HOA on top, so they're otherwise double paying. And so, again, you need to be really careful about how you set those to make sure that it's an equitable distribution, but that is another reason why you have multiple districts, because they may have different tolerances for those mill levy rates.
And in an operations overlay district, let's say there's 7 districts or future districts, but only 2 are built out. That means those residents in 1 and 2 could get on the overlay district board right away, right?
Correct.
So I think that's one of the benefits of it, right?
Correct. Yeah. That's huge.
So what can we write into encourage/require overlay districts and also promote consolidation over time?
We can do that. Probably just for residential. I think it's less of a concern for a commercial district, but for a residential district, I think it's really helpful.
And just sort of one last question. Since we've got all these changes, we're still awaiting more more data to make some final decisions, and I'm sure we'll have comments when we see a complete draft. How do we ensure that we don't have any metro districts form prior to our new model being finalized and approved?
Well, again, I talked to this particular attorney that's looking at organizing a metropolitan district and told him that we are looking at changes to the model service plan, and he seemed amenable. And so part of it is just keeping those lines of communication open. The second thing is, I guess, is looking at what is the time frame for completing this project. And you're probably going to the question, do we need a moratorium or is it not needed? I think we have a really pretty complete model service plan. It doesn't incorporate the feedback from staff, which we're going to, of course, have feedback from staff. We can continue to look at other models. So, I think you could adopt something within a month. I might be being wildly optimistic, but so I guess I don't know that you need a moratorium, knowing who's in the pipeline and thinking we can get this accomplished fairly quickly.
Yeah, except that you're gonna float a draft of this around to various developers, and they might decide they don't like what they see and might apply.
Well, they probably won't. I mean, I think if we, well, if we, I mean, I think it's, yeah. But then it's a public meeting and they come and express their concerns at public meetings. I guess that's a question for you guys as to what process you want us to follow, to get this to the finish line.
Moratorium, would that require 1 or 2 readings?
One,
I guess I'm thinking you're overly cautious. Next meeting, do you adopt a 60-day moratorium with the thought that we're going to get this done in that time period, or?
I mean, I think what you want to do is not discourage development, and I don't see that a 60-day moratorium would discourage development, because I think where you are, the next possible Tabor election is November, so waiting for 60 days, I don't think would prevent anybody from organizing a service plan on that time frame. But I know that there is at least one developer that is interested in and working on getting to a submittal.
Yeah. What else do we need to talk about?
Okay, so that was sort of a consensus that you'd like me to bring back to you for the next, not the one tonight, the next meeting, like a 60-day moratorium, and then we also work on floating to you a draft once we have it, moving it forward?
I mean, I feel like that is the safest approach, is it?
That's all I've got. So now, I mean, is there any questions we haven't addressed? We can also go to your executive session if you wanted on property, if we've completed the discussion on metro districts.
I did have one question, I don't know if others do. It was Fort Collins that specifically removed the power of eminent domain from the metro district. And I was curious if you had a perspective on that. I know we recently had one come to us to authorize that power.
I like keeping it as a power that they may have with your consent, because you don't want to be in a position where the town has to condemn property. You'd much rather have, you know, if you need a right-of-way dedication or something, you'd rather have the Metropolitan District use that eminent domain power to dedicate it to you. So I guess I would rather keep it as it's permissible with your consent.
Any other questions? So I would propose that, since we have half an hour here, that we go ahead with the executive session, but maybe take a few minutes to take a quick break. Okay. Well, then why don't we briefly stand in recess, and then we'll reconvene with the intent of going into executive session. transfer or sale of any real, personal, or other property And we will adjourn the work session and then begin our regular council meeting in 5 minutes. Oh, you're the man. Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. I will call to order the Tuesday, February 24th, Timnath Town Council meeting. Ms. Albies, can you take the roll, please?
Mayor Robert Axmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner.
Here.
Council Member Jeremy Holt, Council Member Bill Jenkins,
Here?
Council Member Lisa Lake.
Here.
All right, 4 council members are present. Council member Holt is out of town, and we expected that this evening. Before we jump in, are there any requests to amend the agenda this evening? All right. Hearing none, our first item is presentation of the State of the Town video. This is our second year doing this format, which is a short video. I appreciate all of council and all of the staff members that assisted in putting this together. Before we jump in, I did want to make just a few comments. First of all, I really wanted to thank the community for all of the engagement and input over the past year. Certainly, we can't do our job. The staff can't do their job without the community assisting us. And so specifically as it relates to the town survey, participating in the comprehensive plan, attending events like the project fair and council chats, just really appreciate all of the engagement. I also wanted to give community thanks for the rec center project. Ultimately, the voters of Timnath, moved that forward and identified it as a priority for us. I did want to thank Dennis Strakota, who's present, who led the citizen initiative in favor of that, and very much appreciated your work on that, sir. Also wanted to thank the Main Street Board and the Old Town Steering Committee. We made a lot of progress over the last year, moving things forward, and still a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of people that put a lot of effort into that, and very, very grateful. I want to take a moment and appreciate our amazing town staff here and our different teams that make the magic happen every week, beginning with Town Manager Aaron Adams. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for keeping the train on the track and moving forward, and we very much appreciate that. Wanted to thank our police department, who had a big year in terms of bringing on new leadership, and Chief Scott, thank you to you and to your team. We continue to be very fortunate to have such a great police department. The finance team, Scagliardi and your whole team, it's been a busy year. We've been transitioning systems, and we keep bringing new projects forward, and there's a lot to do, so thank you very much. Our Public Works team, Director Stone and the whole team, obviously the Parkway completion as well as the continued success of broadband would not be possible without your great team. Parks and Recreation and our event team, Director Casal and your team, thank you very much. Obviously the rec center is huge. A lot of work's already gone into that and continues to go into that. The expansion in our programming, rec center recreation programming, has been very well received, and as always, the events in town are second to none. Community development, we're seeing a lot of great things happening here, including some great commercial development, some new restaurants, appreciated Main House providing our meal between sessions here, but the whole community development team moving the comprehensive plan forward, continuing to update our policies. I really appreciate that. To our HR team, Hope Bernstein and everybody there, we keep growing with staff, and that's not an easy thing to do. We're doing a lot of hiring. It seems like every job we post has over 300 applicants, and there is a ton going into that. Wanted to thank our attorney, Ms. Steffel. We keep you busy, and so thank you very much. And then finally, specifically as it relates to this video, I wanted to thank Ben and the Slate team in our communications. You did a great job as always. Also wanted to thank our various commissions and committees that assist us doing our work, specifically the Planning Commission. I see Mr. Goldstein is back there. Phil, it's always good to see you. Our Prost Committee and our Finance Committee, that really helps us out. And then finally, I wanted to thank all of council here. It truly is a pleasure to serve with all of you. You all are doing this as volunteers. You put a tremendous amount of work into this, and I am so thankful. Our Mayor Pro Tem, Luke Wagner, your work on the Finance Committee, your work with the Main Street Board, and your work on traffic and pedestrian safety through Safe Routes to Schools and our other projects really have been amazing, and I appreciate all your work. Councilmember Jenkins, your work on the North Front Range Metro Planning Organization, your focus on transportation issues affecting our town, and your focus on health-related matters and working with the county there really has made a difference, and I appreciate that. He's not here this evening, but Councilmember Holt also is an Energizer buddy. He's always somewhere doing something, including being on the Main Street Board, assisting with finance, and he really is a tremendous advocate and liaison to both our business and nonprofit community, and appreciate that. And then finally, our longest-serving council member, Councilmember Lisa Lake. You know, you were here before we all got here. Your legacy will continue to be the great work you've done with our Prost Committee in advancing health and recreation in our community, and truly am grateful. So with that, let me ask if we're ready to go with our 2026 Timnath State of the Town video. Welcome to the 2026 Timnath State of the Town. This past year, Timnath kept growing, but we did it with intention. Let's start by sharing the highlights. Community-driven progress, key infrastructure work, thoughtful planning, and the momentum you helped create. Here's what we accomplished and what's next for Timnath. This year, our message is simple: growth with heart. Because Timnath isn't just expanding, we're building a community that works for everyone. We've made big progress on priorities, including broadband success that strengthens access and opportunity, Timnath Parkway improvements that support safety and mobility, and the Main Street movement, building momentum for a connected, vibrant town center. And most importantly, you showed up. Your engagement helped guide decisions, and your vote helped shape the future. With the community's support, we're moving forward with the new rec center, a major investment for generations to come.
In Timnath, growth has to be thoughtful. That means planning ahead and making sure development aligns with our values. This year, Council continued work to keep our land use tools current and effective, improve clarity around how development is guided, and support projects that match Timnath's long-term vision. And we're looking ahead, because the next chapter is about direction, not just growth. Work is moving forward on the comprehensive plan, Timnath 2045 Growing with Purpose, to strengthen how we plan for housing, infrastructure, business, and community character. Our vision is clear. We see a vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable community that values stewardship, connectivity, and a high quality of life.
One thing we hear again and again is this: people love living here, and they want Timnath to keep feeling like home. That's why community well-being matters. In this last year, we continued building connections through outreach and engagement opportunities like the 2025 Community Survey, through community conversations at Council Chat, the first ever town project fair, outstanding special events, and meaningful ways for residents to share feedback at yourtimnath.org. We also kept investing in the places we gather and the activities we love, such as parks and trails, expanding our recreation offerings to a diverse number of programs such as Safe Routes to Schools and enrichment classes, and long-term planning that supports access for all ages. And now, with voter support, we're taking the next steps toward the Recreation Center. This is about more than a building. It's about creating year-round space for health, connection, and community. Stay up to date on this exciting project at yourtimnath.org/recreation center.
If you want to see progress, look at what's being built and improved around town. This year, Timnath continued advancing infrastructure that supports growth, including the Timnath Parkway improvements, roadway maintenance and safety upgrades, mobility planning that supports drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians, and the partnerships it takes to keep everything moving. We also continued strengthening regional coordination because Timnath's success depends on collaboration. And with broadband improvements, we're building the kind of infrastructure that supports daily life and future opportunities.
Behind every great project is responsible planning. This year, council and staff stay focused on transparency, strong reserves, and long-term financial stability. As we plan for big investments, including the recreation center, we're building a structure that protects the town's future. That includes clear funding and tracking tools, planning ahead for capital needs, and strengthening financial reporting and communication. The goal is simple. Make smart decisions now so Timnath stays strong for the long haul.
Timnath, thank you. Your voice matters here. Your participation shapes this town, and your support helps make big things possible. Stay connected by following town channels on social media, subscribing to the newsletter, sharing your voice at yourtimnath.org, and joining us at future meetings and community events. We're proud of the progress, we're excited for what's next, and we're committed to growing with heart. Thank you. Very good. Excellent job, everyone. So this is the grand preview. I believe Ben will have things going live tomorrow on all of our various media channels. So please get the word out. Share the link with your friends and whatnot. And again, thank you, everyone. We will now move on to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members to address council on items that don't otherwise have an opportunity to provide feedback. Tonight we have two public hearing items, including the ordinance amending the land use code and the Timnath Shores sketch plan. If you're here and you'd like to speak on those items, I would ask you to wait until we get to them. But otherwise, I have two people signed up for general public comment. So I will first invite Dennis Strakota.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to congratulate you on your work you did in this work session that preceded this meeting. You had a lot of great questions. I've probably worked for a dozen or more governing boards over my career, and the questions you were asking are going to be critical in terms of setting the direction for metro districts in the future. There are just a couple of comments that I would hope that you might take into consideration beyond those that I submitted. One, it's obvious that when these districts are set up, that the developers, builders are the ones that are hiring the attorneys, the management companies, and the landscapers who are doing the principal work going forward. And oftentimes, those changes are not made, even when a district might be controlled by the residents. So I think you just need to bear that in mind when you get input from those parties, that they're probably still representing the interest of the developers. Secondly, I had suggested including or requiring a capital reserve for maintenance on infrastructure that the districts would continue to be responsible for. I think that's critical because what may well happen is that those reserves are not built up, and even though it's not something that the town would be responsible for, the residents might end up having to pay through special assessments if maintenance is not maintained. I know that in my own district where I sit on the board, we do have a capital reserve study that's done, but unfortunately it's not being funded. And so there's not much, that can be done in those particular cases. So I think requiring adequate funding of capital reserves would be important. Thirdly, I think the other thing that's and the most difficult one, and obviously it was the point of much of your discussion, was on the property tax rates and fee limits. It's hard to tell exactly what's an appropriate limit, and I understand your interest in trying to lower those so that homeowners in the future are not taken advantage of. The difficulty is not knowing what a reasonable rate limit would be, especially on those that are servicing the debt. And in those cases, it might be appropriate for the town to require as part of the model service plan that the developer come forward with before they issue debt, so that the town can independently review to see whether or not that's a feasible plan. And certainly I wouldn't want to place any burden on the staff. You could make a requirement that that the developer pay for that through, or reimburse the town for the cost of having somebody independently reviewing that issuance plan. That might be one way of making sure that the term for that payoff of debt is reasonable. So those are just a couple of items, but I certainly appreciate your work and look forward to seeing the final product. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate your contributions, and did appreciate the written feedback in advance as well. Next, I have Debbie Solom. Good evening.
I am Debbie Solom. I'm at 4454 Haymill Court. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As a landscape architect, a wildfire mitigation consultant, and owner of Fire Resilient Landscape Solutions, I am passionate about our community's resilience to wildfire risks. I want to commend the town of Timnath for its proactive approach in reviewing the 2025 Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. It's a mouthful. The future inclusion of essential wildfire risk reduction strategies within our land use and building code is a significant step toward our town. During the town council work session on February 10th, Scott Robinson from the Community Development and Planning Department, along with his team, delivered an impressive presentation showcasing their extensive research and collaboration with the Community Planning Assistance for Wildfires. I appreciate his and the department's efforts in addressing this crucial issue. One pertinent question was raised by the council was about the potential impact of the new code on construction costs. To address this, I'd like to highlight a key finding from a report by Headwaters Economics and the Institute for Business and Home Safety, which is available on the Headwaters Economics website. I brought copies tonight if anybody's interested. The report emphasizes that by effectively reducing fuels such as vegetation, outlying buildings, and fencing between homes, we can disrupt fire and ember spread. This is a critical component of enhancing safety and reducing overall risk. Moreover, the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Program offers a comprehensive approach to wildfire risk reduction. By implementing mitigations for structures and creating defensible spaces, we can significantly lower ignition risks from the embers and flames. Their analysis shows that utilizing wildfire-resistant building materials to the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Standards leads to only a modest increase in construction costs. Specifically, for a one-story, 1,750 square foot mid-range home valued at $500,000, building to IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Standards results in an increase of just 2 to 3% over traditional construction methods. This information underscores the long-term value of investing in fire-resilient practices. Ultimately, these enhancements not only help protect our homes, but also strengthen our community against the ever-present wildfire threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon. Appreciate you. All right. Those are the only two people I have signed up. Before we move on, is there anyone present that did not get a chance to sign up but would like to speak this evening? Okay. Seeing no one, then we will move on to our consent agenda, which consists of 3 items. The first being approval of the February 10th Town Council meetings. The second being Resolution Number 11, Series 2024, resolution approving the independent contractor agreements with Stifel, Nicholas and Company Incorporated and RBC Capital Markets LLC for their Recreation Center underwriting services. The third is Resolution Number 12, Series 2026, a resolution approving the purchase of 1 Freightliner 114 SD for the Public Works Department. Council, any requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll go to mayor and council reports. Councilmember Lake, anything?
Nothing to report tonight.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Just one small item. I serve on the Finance Committee for the NFR MPO, and I was also recently tapped to participate in a review of IT services, which is required every 5 years. And so I had the privilege of reviewing 16 IT proposals and narrowing it down to 3 and doing 3 interviews. And in the process, I thought I was pretty well versed in IT details, but learned a lot in the process. And hopefully they'll select a good partner. So that was a good experience for me.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to comment on, excuse me, the Timnath Middle High, but so I won't talk about that. But I thought it was a great event. I just want to throw out there to council, I think you've probably been seeing across the news and in our neighboring communities these data centers going in. And I think staff put out a questionnaire for data centers, so I'm hoping we can kind of put those on the front burner for us. I don't know, Denver put a moratorium on their data centers. I'm not sure we want to go down that path, but I'm just saying that these are pretty hot item in other communities. So I want to hopefully push this council to come up with some thoughts on that so we can quickly prepare for the next steps for data centers. So those are my only council report out.
Thank you. I did want to mention the Timnath Middle High School basketball programs. Yesterday, I think 4 of our council members and a good portion of our Parks and Rec staff and our police department attended an event at the school yesterday. It was the grand unveiling of the middle high school trophy case, which was really cool. And they did a little pregame ceremony honoring kind of everyone that contributed to us. They were kind enough to invite the town staff and council, but it was just terrific. And I really enjoyed that. So I wanted to thank the school for inviting us out to that. On the topic of basketball, it sounds like this Sunday the playoff brackets will come out. For the both boys and girls basketball teams, and we expect both of them to make the playoffs. Sounds like we will get to host at least the first round games for both. So it sounds like that'll be announced on Sunday, but I encourage folks to turn out, support the team. It really is fun to collaborate with them, and that is one place that we can all go out and be together as a community and do something positive. So encourage folks to keep an eye on that. Then my last update is we do have the election coming up. The League of Women Voters has been kind enough to host a forum for the candidates. So that will take place here on March 16th. I believe it'll also be available online. I encourage folks to come out and hear from all the candidates. Anything else before we move on? All right. Moving on to staff reports, beginning with Community Development. Director Robinson.
I really don't have any updates. I do want to note that for the comprehensive plan, I have a save the date note in there. Our consultants, Barry Dunn, are going to be back in Timnath March, I believe 24th and 25th, for some more community engagement. So mark your calendars. They're coming back to town to kind of keep our process going along.
Great, thank you. And I did appreciate, and it's in the packet, the slides kind of talking about where we're at in the comprehensive plan process, and very much encourage folks to come out and take advantage of those engagement opportunities. Counseling questions, community development? Yep. Public Works, Director Stone.
Yeah, I did have one item that wasn't in a report. I think it was mentioned on the video, is the project fair, our second project fair we had on the 12th. Wanted to thank the public. We had 100 people, doubled what we had last year, and we had them before the event started, and we even had them at the end, so we'd help them out. So I also want to thank all the other departments that participated with us to make it successful. I did also see quite a few council members there. Thank you for your participation in that. And so just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it was an outstanding event, standing room only at one point there, and my daughter really liked the cookies. So, great job. All right, anything for Public Works? All right. Parks and Rec, Director Casal. All right, Finance, Gagliari.
I just wanted to add that we have a recruitment open for a finance committee member, and those applications close on March 16th. You have the preliminary December financials in your packet. We have the audit scheduled for April. These numbers are preliminary. We're still making adjustments up until the audit, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for reminding us of the Finance Committee opening. We also have openings on Prost and an opening for alternate on the Planning Commission. So it's a great time to get involved. Council questions?
Yep. Lisa, I was just going over a couple things in the summary that you provided, so thank you. In the general fund summary, when looking through it, it looks like we are pretty accurate on our staffing costs for the budget. And I think I'm on, so other council members can see it. Page 7 of 15. Is that right? Let me go down one more, sorry. So it was, sorry, I'm on page 5 of 15, where we go over the expenditures by department. And down on below, it's the expenditures by category. So we were pretty accurate with our personnel services. It looks like we hit that almost like within a 5% threshold. There's the material and services that we were looking at there. That had a almost like a, we were at 80% there compared to budget for that general fund summary and expenditures by category.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of walk me through
Sure.
that?
So the materials and services, so let me back up. Personnel
Yep.
services, the 6% savings there is primarily vacancy savings. Materials and services is anything that's not personnel or capital or transfers. So that's all of our contracts and supplies. As we close out that books, that number will get smaller. I don't imagine substantially. So that's net savings that'll go into the fund balance at the end of the year. We did roll forward a portion of that into 2026, I believe around $300,000. But I imagine we'll still be well under that for the end of the year, and that'll be
So
an
those are
increase.
savings that we realized through
Right.
operations.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay, great. And then the transfers out, those are just capital transfers not realized through the CIP?
Capital transfers, and that number will change too as we get the final invoices and we account for transfers to the capital fund.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, I appreciate it.
Any other questions for finance? Thank you. Now, Chief, you didn't make the agenda, which I'm sure is an oversight. Anything to share?
It is in the agenda.
There was an update.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I'm one version behind. All right. Thanks, Chief. Thanks for being here. All right. Anything before we move on? All right. We will move on to our regular business items. We've got 2 this evening. Both of those are first readings and setting of a public hearing. As you recall, we used to do these on consent agenda, but now we do a brief presentation mainly so people can get oriented and take the next 2 weeks to really think and contemplate and come up with good questions. So our first item is 7A, first reading and setting a public hearing on March 10th, 2026 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 5, series 2026, an ordinance amending the municipal code and adopting by reference the 2025 Colorado Wildlife Resiliency Code in accordance with state statute. Director Robinson.
Mayor, council members, yes, I want to give a little background on the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. Appreciate your feedback from the work session last time we met. So I'll give a quick overview and talk about the next steps. So to let everybody know, the state mandated minimum requirements for developments within the WUI areas. That's the wild urban interface. The state published a map that indicates various different degrees of fire intensity, and this code applies to all new construction or significant alterations to existing structures. A little bit of background again, state adopted it back on July of 2025. Local agencies must adopt it by April 1st, and it becomes effective on July 1st of this year. The wildland urban interface, that's the geographical area where human development meets with or intermingles with wildland or vegetative fuels. So the state did a big mapping exercise statewide and mapped these WUI areas. And just for context, I suspect the Marshall Fire was one of the things that really pushed the state to legislate more action to take place. So this is a screen capture of the WUI area just outside of Boulder and Superior and Louisville. The colors that you see, red is a high intensity area, the orange is a medium, and the yellow is a low intensity. Real quickly, the fire burned about a little over 6,000 acres of over 1,000 single family homes were destroyed, 9 multifamily residential structures were destroyed, as well as 11 commercial. That red area is the extent of the fire, and you can see portions of that extended outside of the WUI. And so sometimes people look at the WUI map and they're like, well, that's not going to impact us. Why do we have to worry about the urban wildlife interface? This is a good example of some extreme situations where fire did occur in the WUI and it impacted a very built-out urban environment. So what the intensity map classifications, that those colors, the red, orange, and yellow, equate to various hardening requirements for the structure as well as landscaping requirements around your property. Larimer County just adopted their Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code, and they basically require everything within Larimer County to meet Class 2 standards. So that's over on the right shows all the things that need to happen with that. This is just a real simple graphic of what that entails. So items, 1 through 7 kind of pertain to the building structure. 8 and 9 are pertaining to landscaping and fencing. And so one of the main things that really drove a lot of that fire, at least in the Marshall, was cedar fencing in a lot of those built-out areas. So what this code does get into, again, with new construction, puts on new standards to help make your structure hardened, to be more resilient, to withstand wildfire. Community benefits, taking a community-wide approach is most effective, rather than being piecemeal, assuming that property owners will maybe take it into their own hands and build their structures to a higher standard. I mean, that's common with any building code standards. We just updated your national building code to the 2024 standards, so it's just a common thing that happens. A lot of research done about high rates of underfunded insurance. Insurance agencies are going to be looking at these WUI maps and are going to be considering insurance rates as this moves forward. It's also a great opportunity to educate community members with education enforcement about ways to help improve fire safety, both with existing and new construction. Yes, there are exemptions. Generally, here's a quick list of those exemptions that are provided in the state code. Again, the state requires minimum standards. What we discussed is doing some local amendments, not going as far as what Larimer County did, but establishing a Class 1 tier for Timnath. So this is a screen capture, again, of the WUI map for Timnath. So some subdivisions showing the different intensity ratings, but what we're looking at doing is passing a Class 1 standard for the entire town as a baseline, and then for those few locations that are those orange, they would have to meet those Tier 2 standards. Some of those locations are already existing structures, so they wouldn't be impacted unless they were to do some additions and what have you. Timeline, again, is we have to adopt this code by April 1st. We have the second reading on March 10th. Already talked about our baseline standards being a Class 1. And then again, we will also bring forward an IGA, Intergovernmental Government Agreement, with Poudre Fire Authority about them helping us with the enforcement provisions of some of those standards. Planning, community development will be looking at most of the exterior landscaping and fencing requirements, so it's kind of a partnership on how that will work out. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. And I know we asked a lot of good questions at the work session, and we'll have a public hearing on this, but any questions this evening? Okay. There are no questions then. Is there a motion to approve on first reading and to set a public hearing on March 10th, 2026 at 6 p.m. for the ordinance amending the municipal code and adopting by reference the 2025 Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code in accordance with state statute?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. We'll be back on March 10th at 6 p.m. for public hearing. Moving on to item 7B, first reading and setting a public hearing on March 10th, 2026 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 6, series 2026, an ordinance amending the land use code. Mr. Kemper.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. With this amendment before you, staff is proposing a comprehensive sign plan, or CSP, application to the town's process and procedures to allow for a coordinated and flexible approach to our signage for larger, more complex developments. The process is intended to provide an alternative means of compliance beyond the strict application of Article 7 of our code, which is regulating our signs. For additional flexibility and creativity within a structured review that would support a unified approach and character within a development. The CSP proposed aligns with the town sign code, which is intended to promote public health, safety, and welfare while furthering the purpose statement stated in the code, which recognizes that signs are a necessary means of visual communication for the convenience of the public and provide flexibility within the sign review and approval process to allow for a unique circumstances and creativity, which is stated within our code now. So expanding upon that to create that process that would allow for that flexibility. Qualifying developments would include multi-tenant, mixed use, planned development overlay districts, and large-scale non-residential developments, which could include institutional sites. Through this process, limited adjustments may be requested and reviewed administratively to assign size, height, number, or location while ensuring that the signage remains proportional, visually cohesive, architecturally compatible, and supportive of business identification. Again, this item will be scheduled to return before you all on March 10th at the Town Council meeting for a public hearing.
Council will have a full public hearing, but any questions that can't wait? All right. Then is there a motion to approve on first reading and to set a public hearing on March 10th, 2026, 6 p.m. for, did I lose it? For an ordinance amending the land use code.
So moved.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Carries unanimously. We'll be back on March 10th at 6 p.m. for a public hearing. Thank you. All right, on to our public hearing items for the evening, beginning with ordinance number 4, series 2026, an ordinance amending the land use code to address food truck vendors, outdoor lighting, bike lane, and accessory dwelling unit rear setback standards. Director Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. A little smorgasbord of land use codes for you tonight. This is mostly some cleanup amendments that we're considering. Real quickly, looking at food truck vendors, what we'd like to do is bring this more into an administrative process with our business licenses. Currently in the code, we have some provisions that really speak to what is being reviewed as far as an administrative permit for operating within the town of Timnath. Currently, the way zoning works is it looks at private property, and most of the time food trucks are actually vending on our public right-of-way. And again, that's where we would best be administrating that through a business license and a food truck permitting system that we will develop with a special use permit. Most of the town's activities are currently done through events, and so a lot of the food trucks we currently coordinate with the Parks Department with food trucks that happen through those special use permits, make sure they have their businesses licenses and what have you. The state also passed a requirement that if the food truck vendor has passed their various health and other safety inspections in another municipality, it's valid in Timnath. So again, this is just cleaning up something in our land use code to move it into an administrative process and clarify that. In looking at that, we wanted to clarify that food trucks are not a temporary use. Just want to differentiate the difference between a temporary use and the special use permit. And then there was some strange language in there, again, cleaning up about some clarifications on durations of time and et cetera with temporary use, about tobacco and other things that don't seem germane to today. Next thing, or outdoor lighting, going back to the holiday season, back in May of 25, we updated our lighting standards to be dark sky compliant. As part of that code, we have somewhat of a holiday exemption for holiday lights, and we pushed out some social media to notify our residents about that provision to be neighborly and to turn off your lights at 11 p.m. We got some interesting feedback from the community and really helped look at our code, and trying to enforce it became kind of challenging. And how do we look at lawfully non-conforming uses prior to that code amendment, and what constitutes a holiday light and what doesn't constitute a holiday light. So what this provision is simply doing is moving out some of the prohibited language of chase lighting. There's no changes to the seasonal lighting, and moving that into within the design standards so that it does allow for some of this chase lighting. Those are some images that you see on the right for either holiday purposes and or security purposes. So there are many examples around the community at evening that do have this type of lighting. We currently have no way to regulate it. It's not permitted. It would be very challenging to enforce. The dark sky provision does still allow for us to enforce through light trespass, so that's a more effective means to deal with some of those lighting concerns. This is just really making sure that our amendment to the accessory dwelling units are consistent with state code requirements. So this is a follow-up to that. There were some provisions that we needed to make sure that's consistent with state code. So that's what these amendments are dealing with in regards to ADUs. And then likewise, in reviewing the land use code, we're just making sure that there's consistency with the Larimer County urban area street standards, Lucas, which we have adopted, and making sure there's consistency with those standards in the land use code. So we removed the 8-foot wide requirement on both sides of the street, as opposed to currently now we're referencing Lucas. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. The Planning Commission did hear this and recommended a positive recommendation to Town Council with a recommendation of 4-0. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And before we move on to questions, we are slated for a public hearing here today. I don't believe anyone has signed up, but I will ask if there's anyone present that would like to speak on this topic. We'd be happy to hear from you. I don't see anyone, so we will now go to council questions. I guess I just have one, which, you know, on Harmony, there's a business that late at night does have some pretty bright lights. And I think we've had some community feedback about that, specifically as it relates to the residents that live nearby. Does anything about this amendment change what could happen with that sort of property?
No, again, it doesn't. And even if you looked at when those lights were in place, it was prior to when that code was adopted. So technically, it gets a little bit difficult to determine if those lights were updated, or usually we trigger compliance with updating or an expansion or what have you. This change wouldn't impact that. Light trespass still is light trespass, and we could enforce through those sorts of complaints submitted to the town.
And I have no idea what the technology is on that building. Is there some way that we can regulate, maybe this is Carolyn a question, not necessarily the presence of the light, but the intensity at certain hours?
I think I'd need to get back to you on that. Generally, the lights are part of the initial design approval, so that's why I think Scott was saying there, you know, even if we change the code, they'd be non-conforming use. But in terms of the times of use, we probably could regulate a time of use of lights.
We could, it would get difficult, and I don't know the specific instance on that business. I mean, this building here has those lights on it. The PD has those lights on it. So again, I think it gets to how do we enforce it, and probably the best means to enforcing is looking at light trespass. It's difficult because our human eye is very sensitive to light, and so depending on time of day, background lighting, what have you, can be challenging because sometimes you can look at it and be like, that's intense. But when you look at the light trespass, it can be a different thing. Town is also doing things with our street lighting. I think there was a recent demonstration project in Old Town to help make those lights more dark sky compliant. So the town is working towards that goal. This doesn't necessarily diminish that.
Yeah, and certainly we need to practice what we preach if we are in fact preaching. Yeah. Okay, well, I appreciate you looking at that, and it certainly is something that we've heard from the community on.
Yeah, just to be clear, light trespass is a physical standard that's measurable, correct?
Yeah, it's in the land use code, so it's a candle.
Right.
It's a candle foot of light that falls onto the adjacent property owner. Shining light onto, a bright light onto a property, wall
Right.
or building, there's things that we
Right.
can look at doing that. So
And so the point being that the present lights on that building or the ones on this building or residential buildings don't exceed measurable light trespass standards on adjacent properties, correct?
I haven't personally gone out and investigated them, but if you looked at those lights, the trespass would have to fall on the adjacent property owner. So you're talking about going across the street and onto those parcels.
Yeah.
And there's different standards from commercial to residential and what have you, and open space, but that's the best way to look at that.
Right.
And I think going back to the time of operation, so currently the challenge is getting into interpretation. Holiday, what designates a holiday? We designated a time period. There are other holidays, the time of the year, where I know our community programs these lights to celebrate different holidays throughout the year. So it just gets into a very challenging enforcement situation of, hey, it's after 11 and it's not a holiday. Then it gets into, is it a security light or not a security light? So there are some nuances to lighting that we have to be mindful of.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Lisa.
I'm just going to ask because Robert had brought it up, but since there have possibly been complaints about particular businesses, my question would just be, has staff ever gone to the owner just to ask them if they would be willing to turn lights off at a certain time? And you don't have to answer that right now, but just something for us to think about, because that's what I always tell my neighbors. If you have a problem with another neighbor, first go and talk to that person.
My position with enforcement is the best way for the town to track it is we have a complaint form, is submit a complaint online and we'll take care of it. We'll follow up with it. Yes, there's been conversations and references, but I have not received a formal complaint. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Then is there a motion to approve ordinance 4 series 2026, an amendment to the land use code?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I appreciate the updates.
All right. I have nothing to add. So all those in favor of approving the ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? It passes 4-0. We'll move on to our final agenda item of the evening, resolution number 13, series 2026, a resolution approving the Timnath Shores sketch plan. Ms. Jones, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Item 8B is a sketch plan proposal for the Timnath Shores subdivision. The owner is Cottonwood Development Partners, LLC, and the applicant is JR Engineering, LLC, represented tonight by Mr. Ken Merritt. The subject property consists of 76 acres, generally located at the southeast corner of Larimer County Road 3E and County Road 42E, approximately 1/2 mile east of County Road 5 and adjacent to Timnath Reservoir. In September of 2024, the comprehensive plan designation for the property was amended from entirely rural residential to approximately 51 acres of low-density residential and 24 acres of rural residential. In September 2025, the property was annexed into the town of Timnath and zoned as R2, which is single-family residential, and RE, which is estate residential. These are consistent with the amended comprehensive plan designations. The surrounding property outside of the town's municipal boundary is zoned rural residential RR2 in unincorporated Larimer County. This Larimer County zoning district serves as a transition between rural and urban areas and is intended to accommodate rural residential uses along with compatible agricultural and civic uses. In accordance with Table 2.1, hearing process and notice requirements, the sketch plan requires a neighborhood meeting, which was held on October 16th, 2025. And an overview of that discussion is included in the observation report in your packet. This application also requires public hearing with both the Planning Commission for their recommendation and the Town Council for your approval. On February 17th, 2026, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval to the Town Council. And in advance of both of these hearings, the site was properly noticed. Public notice was physically posted on the property. Letters were sent to property owners within 500 feet of the site, and a hearing notice was published in the Coloradoan. So the application before you tonight is for a sketch plan, which is a conceptual layout of a proposed development creating more than 6 lots. The sketch plan is the first step in the major subdivision process, and it identifies the intended density, land uses, traffic circulation, and location of future parks and trail connections. So as far as your review of the application before us tonight, the sketch plan evaluates compatibility with the comprehensive plan and zoning, overall neighborhood layout and connectivity, general density and open space patterns. At the sketch plan stage of this review process, we are not approving detailed engineering, traffic impacts, drainage design, exact lot dimensions, or construction plans. These technical details are evaluated at preliminary plat, where the town reviews the full subdivision design and infrastructure. So approval of the sketch plan does not constitute approval of the development. It only authorizes the applicant to proceed to the next stage of the review process. So under the existing zoning, 51.44 acres zoned as R2 allows for a maximum density of 4 dwelling units per acre, and 24.61 acres zoned RE allows for a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per acre. Based on these maximum permitted densities, the site allows for up to 229 dwelling units, subject to final platting and design considerations. So at very maximum permitted density, this could total 204 R2 lots and 25 estate residential lots. The proposal also includes a 2-acre pocket park, regional trail extensions in accordance with the town's PROST framework, green belts, off-street pedestrian and bike paths, a community amenity area, and a 50-foot natural habitat buffer along the west shore of the Timnath Reservoir. The development also provides over 15 acres of open space, exceeding the town's minimum 20% open space requirement. So as previously mentioned, the sketch plan is a conceptual document which establishes the overall framework for future subdivision platting. Its purpose is to confirm that the proposed land use and general development pattern can comply with the comprehensive plan and the underlying zoning standards. The precise location and alignment of lots, roadways, utilities, and other infrastructure will be determined during the preliminary and final plat processes, as these are subject to a further technical review. So for the review of the sketch plan, we evaluate the application based on these 4 criteria. Criterion 1, the land mix within the project conforms to the town's zoning district map and land use map and furthers the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. The 76-acre site includes approximately 51 acres zoned R2, single-family residential, and 25 acres zoned RE, estate residential. These are consistent with the low-density residential and rural residential designations, respectively. The plan also incorporates parks, trails, and open space areas that enhance neighborhood connectivity and link to the broader community. It strengthens recreational access to the Timnath Reservoir and includes a range of residential lot sizes that support housing variety and neighborhood character. It also satisfies a number of goals and criteria from the town's comprehensive plan, including goals 3.1, 3.2, 3.6, and 5.1, as well as a number of objectives which are detailed further in the staff report. Criterion 2. The sketch plan represents a functional system of land use and is consistent with the rationale and criteria set forth in this code and the town's comprehensive plan. So the sketch plan does present a functional layout of residential lots, open space, and trails, supporting the comprehensive plan's goals for connected neighborhoods, open space preservation, and pedestrian access. Lot placement and open space locations create logical transitions to adjacent future developments while leaving flexibility for more detailed design at the preliminary plat stage. Criterion 3. The utility and transportation design is adequate given existing and planned capacities of those systems. So at the sketch plan stage, detailed utility and transportation studies are not yet required. However, our preliminary review indicates that sanitary sewer, water, and other utility systems can be accommodated, with the final design and coordination to occur at the preliminary plat stage. A transportation impact study will also be submitted at this time, and future improvements, including auxiliary turn lanes at key intersections, will be determined as needed to meet town standards and anticipated traffic volumes. Regarding criterion 4, which is negative impacts on adjacent land uses have been identified and satisfactorily mitigated, I would just like to pull up the landscape plan so we can discuss this with some additional visual context. So throughout the review period of this project, adjacent property owners have provided their input, detailing their primary concerns throughout neighborhood meetings and email correspondence. And these emails have been included in your packets. Some of their key concerns require additional technical detail to address, and these will be reviewed at the preliminary plat stage. However, during the sketch plan process, staff and the applicant have taken the following steps to reduce potential impacts to adjacent properties, including, first, the realignment of County Road 3E. The roadway is proposed to be realigned to meet town engineering standards, improving both safety and functionality. This realignment also creates residual parcels of land that could be used for additional landscaping or buffering. Secondly, the shifting of the northern access location. The primary subdivision access has been shifted further north in response to adjacent property owner input, and this has increased the separation from existing residences while maintaining the required spacing from County Road 42E. There's also been enhanced landscape buffering along County Road 3E, including a 25-foot landscape buffer, a 10-foot regional trail, a 7-foot tree lawn with street trees, and a 5-foot tall screening fence to provide visual and physical separation from the adjacent properties to the east. At preliminary plat, staff will encourage additional buffering measures, such as berming and enhanced plantings, which will further soften the transition between the existing larger county lots and future R2 residential lots. Lastly, there's been careful consideration of the open space framework. The conceptual open space and trail corridors are shown to provide visual separation from adjacent properties and support the town's broader parks, trails, and recreational objectives. There are concerns that cannot be fully evaluated until preliminary plat, including final lot configuration, emergency access, utility placement, traffic impacts, and coordination with adjacent agricultural operations. However, staff has determined that the sketch plan provides a reasonable conceptual framework to mitigate impacts to adjacent land uses, with additional technical details to be refined at the preliminary plat stage. So at last week's Planning Commission meeting, there was a unanimous vote 4-0 to recommend approval to the Timnath Town Council. Staff does also recommend approval of the Timnath Shores sketch plan, with the condition to allow staff to work with the owner applicant to address minor modifications prior to final signatures. At this point, I would now turn over the presentation to the applicant, Mr. Ken Merritt with JR Engineering, for him to provide his portion of the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Merritt. It's good to see you as always.
Good evening. Happy New Year to everybody. It's not too late to say that, is it?
No.
Thank you.
I think we all remember the last time we were here discussing this. So I know you tend to be quite thorough, which we appreciate, but 10 or 15 minutes would probably be good for us.
Actually, Lindsay has done such a great job introducing the project tonight. She didn't leave me much to say, which is uncharacteristic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me just kind of go through our work. I do need to sort of earn my keep here.
Yeah.
As you well know, the project is located in the northwest corner of Timnath Reservoir. It's approximately a half-mile east of County Road 5. On County Road 42E is our major access road. And from this point forward, we're going to call 42E Wild Wing Drive, because that is the name we have. To the west of our property is County Road 3E, and we don't have a name for that yet. Just reflecting back on the zoning, one of the primary purposes, as Lindsay pointed out, is that the purpose of the sketch plan is to show compliance with both the town's comprehensive master plan as well as the underlying zoning for the property. As you might remember, when we annexed the 76 acres, we also annexed Wild Wing Drive from County Road 5 to our western boundary, as well as County Road 3E, directly adjacent to our development. And those right-of-ways, both for Wild Wing Drive and for County Road 3, that right-of-way is fully exists, and we're working within that right-of-way. Wild Wing Drive will be extended through the development, which actually bifurcates the R2 zoning area, so that there's a planning area north of Wild Wing Drive and a larger planning area south of Wild Wing Drive. But in total, PA 1 and 2 is approximately 51 acres, zoned R2, and designated as single-family residential property with a maximum density allowance of 4 units per acre and a minimum lot size of 6,000. Along the eastern boundary and southern boundary of the property is that which is identified as PA 3, 25 acres zoned RE, estate residential, with a maximum density of 1 unit per acre and a minimum lot size of 1/2 acre in size. Taking a quick look at the overall, I zoomed out a little bit from Lindsay's plan on the sketch plan. I want to show you our primary access will be from County Road 5 and will extend Wild Wing Drive, which is pretty much an unimproved road right now, road-based road. It will be classified as a rural collector. Now, although we have not done, the sketch plan doesn't require a transportation analysis to be submitted at this time. That's a preliminary plat. We have done enough analysis to determine that some auxiliary lanes on County Road 5 at the intersection of Wild Wing Drive will be required, likely a southbound left-hand turn lane and northbound right-hand turn lane. But Wild Wing Drive will be extended from County Road 5 approximately 1,500 feet to our west boundary line as a rural collector road within an existing 60 and 70 foot wide right-of-way that exists today. As it approaches our western boundary, it'll be extended through the development from our western boundary line to the eastern boundary line as a major collector road within a 80-foot right-of-way. Probably worth mentioning that that portion of rural collector of Wild Wing Drive will be a 36-foot pavement section with auxiliary drainage swales on both the north and south side. But when Wild Wing enters our site, it'll be a major collector road. It'll have curb and gutter on both sides of the road, 36 feet of pavement. It'll have a 7-foot tree lawn on the south side and a 6-foot pedestrian walk. On the north side will be a 10-foot tree lawn and approximately 1,200 lineal feet of regional trail as defined by the town's trail master plan. PA1 moving down to County Road 3E, as Lindsay pointed out, in order to comply with 3E being a minor collector, the current alignment of horizontal alignment of County Road 3 doesn't meet the town's standards as it relates to radiuses, minimum radiuses, and tangent lengths. So we are going to be realigning all of County Road 3 as a minor collector road within a 65-foot right-of-way. The takeaway here, or the important thing to punctuate, is that all the right-of-way necessary for this realignment, as well as widening the right-of-way from 60 feet as it currently is today to 65 feet. All of that right-of-way comes entirely from the Timnath Shores property. There will be no need to acquire additional right-of-way west of the western right-of-way of County Road 3, and I think that's an important point to punctuate. On the east side of County Road 3, it'll be curb and gutter, 7-foot tree lawn, and again, we're actually showing a shared use path, 10-foot wide shared use path, which is actually, once again, part of the Timnath's regional trail master plan. Beyond the 10-foot walk is a 25-foot landscape buffer along the east, what would be the east side of County Road 3E. On the west side of County Road 3E, we'll maintain a roadside drainage swale, and there will be no curb and gutter on the west side. The orange dash line that you see is our internal circulation plan. All the lots within the development are proposed to be accessed internally through a system of local roads that'll be developed within a 60-foot right-of-way, 34-foot pavement, 7-foot tree lawn, 5-foot detached sidewalks throughout. County Road 42E on the south, County Road 42 on the south, and County Road 3E, which extends to our southwestern boundary line, will be developed for as secondary emergency vehicle access. That portion of roadway will be reconstructed in order to handle the load of an 80,000 pound Putter Fire Authority fire truck and emergency vehicles. We'll also be rebuilding a culvert across Lake Canal, and then a much larger culvert along to cross the Putter Canal, Inlet Canal into Timnath Reservoir. This roadway will be gated. It will be for secondary emergency vehicle access only, and will not serve as any primary access to the subdivision itself until such time that land develops either in the Allison Estates or property south of County Road 42. 42 will stay as an undeveloped roadway section, only being developed to about 20 feet in width for emergency vehicle access. I do want to point out that currently the town of Timnath has built, you'll see these red dotted lines along the eastern and southern margins of our property. The town has built a large portion of regional trail internal to our development, depicted by the purple, if you would, purple dots and arrows throughout development, is a system of approximately over a mile of pedestrian off-street, 6-foot wide pedestrian paths that wind their way through all of the open space area. These off-street paths allow residents in the development to circulate through the development without really walking along the actual local streets themselves. And we plan a series of connections of these off-street paths to the actual regional trail shown in red. Additionally, we'll extend the shared use path, which is on the east side of County Road 3. You see those blue dots sort of connecting, utilizing existing easement, which Timnath Reservoir has for maintenance of the reservoir. We plan on extending that 10-foot path at that location. So all told, there will be 4 connections, proposal of 4 connections to the town's regional path, each being approximately a quarter mile apart. Taking a look at the land use data, PA1 to the north is approximately 9.5 acres, zoned R2, maximum density of 4, would theoretically generate 38 dwelling units. PA2, which is south of Wild Wing Drive, this is approximately 41.6 acres, also zoned R2 with a density max of 4, could generate as many as 126 units. And PA3, which is zoned estate residential, approximately 25 acres in size, maximum density of 1 unit and 25 units. Now, all told, PA 1, 2, and 3 could develop as many based on zoning only. This is only based on zoning, not on any lot plans, 229 units. What I'm prepared, with a density of approximately 3 units per acre overall. What I'm prepared to say is that that will never be achieved. Likely, the actual density, when we bring back a preliminary plat with actually lots and dedicated right-of-way and open space, it'll likely be 20 to 25% below that maximum that is allowed by zoning. There's also an open space requirement in the zoning code of a minimum of 20% or 15.2 acres. And what you see in green, everything we're doing with the increased landscape buffers along County Road 3 and along both the north and south side of Wild Wing Drive, the large park space, which is approximately 3.2 acres in size, not to conflict with what Lindsay said about being 2 acres, it's actually 3.2 acres in size, brings the total open space area to 25% or 19 acres in total. And as Lindsay pointed out, there is a 50-foot, we're proposing a 50-foot natural area habitat buffer along the margins of our eastern and southern boundaries in order to help further protect and enhance the shoreline habitat of the Timnath Reservoir. And that concludes my presentation. Did I hit the 10 minutes?
You did awesome.
All right.
Great job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate any comments or questions you might have for me tonight.
Very, very good, and I'm sure we will have some questions, but before we do that, we are slated for a public hearing this evening. I will note that we did receive the written comments by Mr. Martindale and also Mr. Griffith. I believe council has reviewed those. No one has signed up to speak this evening, but I will ask if there's anyone present that did not get a chance to sign up but would like to speak on this item. Welcome. Very well. If you'll state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, Dan Griffith, 2317 South County Road 3E. You have my comments. You've heard these comments 4 or 5 times now. I'm not going to sit here and beat a dead horse. Those have been concerns of mine since day one, since the initial neighborhood meeting. We've been told to wait till we get to this point to be able to address these. I believe the developer and the engineers intend to do that. But to this date, we haven't seen a solution to those concerns. Until I see a solution, you'll continue to see those on your desk. So I would just suggest that as an open issue. And criterion number 4 of the reasons to go ahead and vote and proceed to approve this tonight, I don't believe has been met. Number 4 specifically says have adjacent land uses, have negative impacts on adjacent lands been satisfactorily mitigated. My email with 8, 9 points suggests that they have not. I'm not saying there's not a path forward. I'm saying those have not been addressed. And per this criterion, they should be addressed before this is moved forward. And so that's all I ask is that you guys consider that as you vote this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak this evening? Sir, welcome.
Thank you. Ryan Fertig, 2225 South County Road 3E. Been here many times before as well, understand the process. I think mostly what I want to speak on today is just the concept of representation. I share Dan's issue with item number 4 up there that adjacent property owner concerns have been adequately mitigated. At best, it's insulting. At worst, it's just pure fabrication. And I understand with any development, there's things you have to work through. I think the frustrating part that we've seen is, the concerns have been the same. The density sequence is backwards. You go from our 2-acre lots to more dense to less dense. That's not going to change. I appreciate the moving of the entrance to the north. That's my property there. I can't quite celebrate as I know that, it's not actually official there. And I think the fundamental, sort of stance that's unique to this development is when I bought that land, there were 76 maximum dwelling units possible over there. And, it is what it is. I think at the last neighborhood meeting, the comment I received was, well, you shouldn't have built by a county road. related to the traffic that I was concerned about. And I think it's an interesting comment because inversely, we could have said, well, you shouldn't have bought land zoned R2 in the county. So changes are being made. You've allowed a 300% increase in units as well as revenue, and we as adjacent property owners are bearing the cost. And we're not looking for a percentage of that, but our concerns have remained the same. And I think what you're hearing from us is some form of concerned panic that nothing's happening, right? Feels a bit like I'm talking to ChatGPT, and it keeps reassuring me that my ideas are unique and I'm a rare commodity and all those things. And it's like, is this really happening? So I don't know how it goes. I think what I just want to leave you with is you're our only representation. Jim's probably a good guy, right? But with any development, there's kind of a smiling steamroller aspect to it that he has to do what he has to do, and we're left kind of with the results. So we're looking to you. It's clear what our concerns are. You're our only recourse.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anybody else wish to speak this evening? Seeing no one, we can move on to questions for either the applicant or staff. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Lindsay, maybe can you start just for my understanding, just so I can review this. In section 4, when we talk about the preliminary plat versus the sketch plan and why these will be addressed there, can you walk me through that and maybe the differences there so I can have that understanding?
I can help with that, Mayor
Yeah.
Pro Tem. So within the sketch plan on criteria 4, it's within the framework and the context of the development, being that it is identifying land uses, circulation, general circulation types, and connectivity. So again, it is more of a bubble diagram of kind of what is being proposed. We do acknowledge that there are concerns raised by adjacent property owners. And so the response to criterion 4 is not clear there's no concerns that don't need to be mitigated. It was more so within the context of the sketch plan. So at preliminary, we will have additional studies, review, detailed documentation to further understand and analyze the impacts, maybe through traffic, utilities, drainage, other things that are just not contemplated at the sketch plan level.
Thank you. And so working through that, just so I understand, is public, like the neighborhood is done now, right? The neighborhood meetings, is there no longer any neighborhood meetings? Or
So
is
there
more?
will be an additional neighborhood meeting requirement at preliminary plat. So
what I
there
thought.
is that additional step early within the process of the preliminary plat to get feedback based on the initial submittals proposed by the applicant.
Okay, thank you. And then preliminary plat, as I understand from the graph that comes up here, will come back to us again, right?
Correct. Yep, that will have a public hearing with you at Town Council.
Okay. So tonight, our decision is based on the review criteria that you presented tonight within the sketch plan.
Correct.
Thank you. I think those are my initial questions, and I can step aside for a second if anybody has other questions.
Councilman Jenkins, do you have any?
Well, as I recall, my major concerns had to do with the single access roadway and emergency access being rather limited. And it sounds like that gets addressed in more detail in the preliminary plat. So I'm kind of stuck until I hear more about that. But a single point of egress is is an issue. So I'm really interested in in how the emergency access in the event that the main road is blocked, how people would get in or out, or emergency services would get in there if there was a significant fire or a gas explosion or something like that with multiple casualties. So we'll hear more, I guess, at preliminary plat. And it sounds like, the density, to the gentleman's comment, the density has already been approved. So it's really mitigating other aspects, which both the developer and staff agree that there are issues with the adjacent property, and it sounds like how those get addressed in detail is not in the sketch plan, but in the preliminary plat. So I think we'll all be interested in the details at that point. So that's kind of where I'm at. I want to know more about the details, and they're not here. They're in the next phase.
I appreciated Ms. Jones giving a little bit of detail on some of the things that have already come up to attempt to address some of the concerns. But I did want to offer you the opportunity, Mr. Merritt, as well, if you can provide any additional context or perspective in terms of the concerns you've heard, and in what ways you think these can be worked out or can't be worked out.
Sure. No, this is a good question. Let me first say I certainly made no comment regarding building along a county road. That was never a comment made by myself, and I don't believe at our last neighborhood meeting. I do want to sort of clarify the record there. With regards to, we think that the realignment of County Road 3, even though it needs to occur in order to meet the town standards for geometry, roadway geometry, is an important aspect of helping to further buffer this development from existing county residential development. It's important to recognize that from the curb line, the east curb line, to the rear property lines of that first tier of units along County Road 3, that back to County Road 3, no unit will access off County Road 3. And there are only 2 points of access. There's approximately 42 feet of open space buffer made up of a tree lawn with trees planted 40 feet on center, 25 feet of further landscape buffer behind the right-of-way, which allows for the planting of significant amount of coniferous plant material, both high and low. I don't think that we've made a commitment on the fencing. Lindsay did point out 5-foot fencing around the roadway perimeter, but I think that that's still open for discussion as part of the development. We likely will look at some other alternatives as well. I think that I guess maybe one of the important things to point out is that the concerns that we heard were density, so we've lowered that density from what could be achieved and meet all the design standards of the town of 200, maybe 220 units, 210 units, thereabouts, down to something that is in the order of maybe 20 to 25% less. I will say that after doing some initial sort of lotting analysis, I will tell you there's not a lot on this development. In PA1, there's not a lot there that meets the minimum standard. Every lot is between 10 and 15% larger. Within PA2, that area south, every one of those lots is 20 to 25% larger than the minimum lot size. And then, of course, Timnath Reservoir is identified as a sensitive natural feature. It was one of the reasons why the town designated the land RE to begin with, was to ensure that we preserve the interface between private development land and that sensitive natural area, and we're trying to further enhance that. I think that one of the comments that came out of at least the two previous neighborhood meetings, is that the neighbors would like to see those estate lots backing up to County Road 3. And I think that putting estate lots up against a minor collector road probably would be a mistake. But once again, I never said that building, that the residents that built on a county road made a mistake. That was never articulated by myself nor the developer, I believe. So, you know, those are the key issues. And as Chad and Lindsay have pointed out, the devil's in the details. We need to be able to prove to council that this site can function off a single point of access. Remember, at 180 lots, let's say, that the collector road of Wild Wing Drive is a rural collector road, very much like Busk Grove, east of the Timnath Parkway. And that has, as a collector road, it has a lane volume, I believe, at or above 3,000 vehicle trips. So we don't see that being exceeded. We'll certainly be able to demonstrate that in the next steps. And then certainly when Wild Wing Drive is extended to Wild Wing Drive further to the east, approximately 1.5 miles further to the east in development, the land north and east of this proposed development is all identified as LDR in the town's future master plan, as well as Allison Estates property, which is that property west of the Lake Canal. That's all identified as LDR, and I would expect that development, which was done in the mid-1990s, I believe, likely will not develop as 2.5 acre lots. It'll probably come in and be annexed and zoned. And at that time, County Road 42 will likely be transformed from its secondary emergency vehicle access to a full functioning collector road. I will point out that those 2 box culverts that we have to build across Lake Canal and the Inlet Canal into Timnath Reservoir, those will all be built to the ultimate standard for a full roadway section with regards to the carrying capacity of being able to handle an 80,000-pound vehicle. So those will be actually put in place so that they can be extended for a full road. And it's probably worth pointing out that there is an exemption on that segment between the Lake Canal crossing and the Outlet Canal to the right-of-way. The right-of-way for 42 fully exists. It's 60 to 70 foot of right-of-way, except for a 30-foot exemption south of the section line, because there are structures which exist, and we're going to respect that and be able to move that emergency vehicle access road to the north and make that function. So, you know, the current zoning is being respected. I'm prepared to say that the density of this project won't even reach 3 units per acre. It'll probably be more like 2.3 units. So that is in the realm of single-family housing. That's a very low density. Obviously, that's benefited by the area of 1 acre lots, 1 unit per acre lots that we have. But overall, the density will be, I think, very manageable. And we've listened to the neighbors, and we've tried to, within the context of what we have here, there's a significant amount of improvements that have to be made on this project: water lines, sewer lines, roadway extensions, roadway improvements, realignment of roadways. 76 lots, which is what you would yield under the previous land use designation, certainly could never have supported development of any type. In fact, we worked with other developers on this project that could not make it work. This is an urban scale development of a very low density, and there will be more urban development both west of it and northeast of it in the future, particularly because of the extension of the Box Elder Sanitation District sewer interceptor line, which I didn't mention, but will run through our property and will intended to serve all that land, approximately 400 acres of property, north and east of this development between Prospect Road and the north shore of the lake.
I appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem.
Chad, I wanted to ask questions about the goal 3.6, and maybe Lisa, you can comment on the pros committee on this. The Timnath Reservoir and the land around it for develop as an active recreation area. So we're just classifying the path around this as our active recreation area? Is that the trail that we're classifying as an active recreation area for 3.6?
Yeah, so I think at its core with that goal, it would be for the improvements that are being made by the town for that active recreation, but allowing for development that does create that connection and continues those connections as part of our post plan and trail, being either the multi-use or the regional trail network. That connectivity and maintaining a buffer within that, we felt helped enhance that goal or arrive to that goal within the
So in
company.
the sketch plan, the connections are the key point.
Yes.
Goal 3.6. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, if there are no more questions, then I would ask if there is a motion to approve the recommended approval of the Timnath Shores sketch plan with the condition to allow staff to work with the owner applicant to address minor non-substantive modifications prior to final signatures.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. We'll move on to discussion, beginning with Councilmember Lake.
I just want to encourage staff to definitely work with some of those homeowners in the area with any concerns that may exist. Also knowing that we are sometimes limited up here if it meets certain requirements, but to just try to work with them as well as the developer to work with them to alleviate or help to mitigate any of the issues that can be mitigated.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, so I'm going to be voting in favor of this tonight based on the objectives and the recommendations that were put forward tonight. I, like Councilmember Jenkins, are looking forward to the preliminary plat discussion. I think as we move forward, I think for the developer in our next stages, I appreciate the work that's been done so far with everything, making the changes, taking into consideration the feedback. But I think there's still some work that needs to be done to make this through the next stages.
Yeah, the devil's in the details. And there are a lot of details that are going to have to come to light in the preliminary plat phase. As I said, I'm particularly interested in emergency access. Those culverts and the culvert design are going to be pretty critical for both the short-term and long-term safety aspects, as well as I want to hear more about the gate, but presently I'll vote in favor of the sketch plan and look forward to more details to come.
In looking at the review criteria, I am satisfied that the four applicable criteria have been met here, although I do think a couple of concerns and things to keep on the radar should be noted. With respect to review criteria 1, this has been well documented by staff, how the plan furthers a lengthy, quite frankly, lengthy list of comprehensive plan goals. And so I don't think that there's much doubt there. With respect to whether or not the sketch plan represents a functional system of land use, I do think it does. There has been some real thought given into the density near the reservoir, protecting the natural resource there, and then moving away from that as you get further out. To the extent that there is concerns, actually my concerns continue to be in number 3, which deals with utility and transportation design being adequate. This is not a tiny development, and really it's being served primarily by one single point of access. I do trust the transportation studies that have gone into this to say that it's adequate at this point. I'm a little apprehensive that we're not developing more on the south end in terms of a second access point, but ultimately I'm going to trust the experts there. Also note that Mr. Griffith, in his comments, brought up, in his written comments, brought up some of the utilities, including the power lines and water. I don't know that those necessarily impact the sketch plan here, but he did raise some interesting questions that in the future would be interested in seeing what, if any, progress can be made there. Primary discussion here tonight has been on the negative impacts, potential negative impacts on adjacent landowners. In hearing from both staff and Mr. Merritt, it does look like there has been some reasonable efforts to hear and address those concerns, which I appreciate. In hearing the concerns, I'm trying to look at which of these concerns are specifically related to this property and the configuration of it, and which of those concerns are related to just general frustration that development is occurring in the area. When the concerns relate to specific items, I have seen some specific changes being made to address those. So I appreciate that, and on the whole, I do believe this complies, and I will vote in favor. Any other comments? Okay. Then all of those in favor of approving the sketch plan with the condition noted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Sketch plan will be approved 4-0. Council, unless I have missed anything, we already took care of our executive session item. So I believe we are able to adjourn for the evening.